Well, good morning. My name is Rob Zile, and I'm the director of the Center for Public and Nonprofit Management here at Cleveland State University. And today's one of my exciting days of the year. I'm so thrilled to be able to celebrate with you, celebrate the participants, and just talk about how we have this innovation and advancement within the public sector. 8 is my favorite number. I just want to throw it out there. It's always been a lucky number for me. And I think that cohort number 8 has done a fantastic job throughout this entire process. So I want to say congratulations to you individually, and also just to the fact of how you've all really taken this program seriously to heart, really added value as far as each one of the sessions talk about, what we can bring to the table to kind of advance the actual sector and the friendships and the relationships that have evolved over time. So today is our kickoff of the final section of our program, and that is our project presentations. Project presentations are now actually a 3-day event. Today is the first day, and then we have July 21st is day 2, and then we actually had to add a third day because we have so many projects. So the third day is going to be August 11th. Before I jump into the logistics of that day, though, there's a bunch of thank yous. Again, to the cohort members, to the sponsoring agencies that have sponsored your participation here as far as financially, but also the work release. We really are excited too to add new sponsors, new agencies to the mix, and we're starting to really get to have that cross-fertilization of local, county, state agencies and a couple nonprofits. So I'm really starting to see the synergy to really pop there. So I want to say thank you again for the support that we have. This program, though, can't be run without an amazing team, and I am so honored and privileged to have the most wonderful staff that I get a chance to work with, led by Alexandra Higgle-Timms, Nina Antonek. We also have Bianca Madura, and we're adding a couple new people down the line. So we have an amazing staff that works tirelessly to make sure that each one of the sessions is run without a hitch and doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And then on top of that, a great advisory board. We have a statewide advisory board that is made up of our sponsors and stakeholders from across the state at various levels, various agencies that are part of our supporters and part of our network. And they help us to not only advance the program as far as marketing recruitment, but also looking at the content, looking at the actual outcomes and the deliverables to make sure that we're continuing to meet the standards, not only at the state level, but national as well. So I just want to say, give a shout out to Tarina Allen, who's our advisory board chair, and then any of the board members that are going to be participating today. You may see them online or hear from them throughout the 3 days. They'll be joining us to observe and comment and participate in the next 3 days events. So I want to say thank you to all of them. It's just an amazing network that we are creating here, and really coming along really nicely. Before we jump into the logistics of the day, we have a slight change of our schedule. Christine Cole, who was supposed to present today at 11:10 to 11:40, is under the weather and is not going to be able to join us today. So we're going to have to reschedule her presentation. Therefore, we've moved up Tiffany and Sean's presentation, which was supposed to start at 11:45, is going to now start at 11:10. So we are going to finish a little bit earlier today. So I wanted to alert them, but then also alert the rest of the cohort members and any of our guests that we should be finishing up. I'll expect to be finished up by noon at the latest today. So I'll give you a head start to the rest of your afternoon. So I just want to make sure I point that out, and we'll again reference that as we move closer. So, but if there's any guests or adjustments that you need to make on your side, Tiffany and Sean, as far as people that need to be invited to the presentations, please do that between now and then. So what's going to happen in general, how the day is going to run is that each presenter has about a half-hour period of time throughout the day. Each presentation has a half-hour window. What we'll do is we'll ask that presenter to come up to the screen, they'll present, and then after they get done with their presentation, we'll have a period of question and answer session there. Again, this could be any kind of questions as it pertains to the project, comments or concerns or suggestions that you might have. We just ask that you can either use our Q&A, the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen there, or you can also chat, a live chat, either myself and Alexandra or the presenter at the time. So you can put your comments in the chat box, or if you have a question, please feel free to kind of type those into the Q&A. There's not going to be any kind of live banter or discussion back and forth, but you can use either one of those tools, either the Q&A or the chat, to communicate with the presenter or our team. Secondly, we do ask that everyone who's joining us today, especially the cohort members, to provide feedback on our evaluation form. Each one of the presenters today will have a unique evaluation link that Alexandra will place. I believe it's going to be in the chat box, but she will send out during the webinar a unique evaluation link for each presentation. And we ask everyone, if you're interested and available to do that, to please complete one for each one of the participants. This is something that's a very useful tool as we switched over to the last portion of the program, which is their written report. Each presenter today will follow up with a written report based upon evaluation rubric given to us by the National Consortium, and it kind of helps to kind of round things out. Maybe any kind of questions, concerns, suggestions, or even any kind of compliments or things that are fantastic within the presentation that they can maybe emphasize further as they move forward. So that is a couple things that we want the actual guests today to actually engage in the process, to interact with our team and our presenters, and please be sure to complete those evaluations so it can help them as they move forward with everything that's rocking and rolling. For those of you that are presenting, for the 21st or August 11th, this will be the exact same process for you during that time. So make sure that you're inviting any guests or friends or family that you would like for them to be there as well. So make sure that they're there. And then we're going to try to stay close to those windows of the time period so that they can participate, but then also stay on schedule. If for any time today you need to take a coffee break or check your emails or things like that, feel free to do so. We hope to have a little gap in between the start of each one of the presentations, but we're also conscientious of the time and want to make sure that we get you all completed and in and out of here around the lunch period, so we're not taking too much time today. Alexandra is put on the screen the actual overviews of each one of the projects. So if you see overall program for the day, we have the run of show as far as the schedules, but then there's a short description for each one of the presentations as well. So for those of you that are guests that are not necessarily familiar with the entire cohort per se, it might be a good reference for you to kind of get an idea of what everybody's been working on over this past cohort. And I also put a plug in for our previous presentations. Obviously, this is cohort number 8, but we have 3 other cohorts that we have recorded those presentations, and they're actually online right now on our website. So I would really suggest that if you have the time to take a look at basically the library that we're creating of innovation and change and excellence, I think, in public service. So please feel free to take a look at those when you get a chance. Gives you a nice perspective and overview of the dynamic and diverse portfolio that we're creating here within the system. A couple nuts and bolts as far as some of the logistics is for the participants. This is, again, the last phase of the program. So you have the oral presentation either today, the 21st, or August 11th. And then we're asking folks to kind of complete the written report, probably due within a month or so. So probably a month from the August 11th presentation. So we're looking around mid-September timeframe to turn in and submit your written report, so you can get that into us. At that point in time, the reports are then distributed and reviewed by our team members, but also advisory board members. They are part of our evaluation and review team. So each one of the presentations is going to be reviewed and evaluated by both our team and by a third-party board member. And then you'll receive feedback, written report on if there's any suggestions or revisions, or if you're good to go, then you'll get an approval form and you can move on with life at that point in time. So that's how things work as far as the next phase of our program here. And we'll be working with you, each individual participant, as we move forward. The last part for the Public Management Academy is just to close out any open classes that you might have. So Alexandra has a Google form that has our schedule of events on there as far as the next cohort or any classes that you might have missed. Obviously, this is cohort number 8. Number 9 is probably 2/3 of the way done, and cohort number 10 is scheduled to start in October of this year. So which should be plenty of opportunities for you to take on or make up any classes that you might have missed. So our team will be preparing what we call professional development hours, or basically a transcript for each individual participant. So you'll know exactly what you need to make up, and we can go from there. And I'll close things out before I transition over to our first presenter, just by saying that we do have 2 upcoming cohorts. October 20th is going to be Public Management Academy number 10. And then October 21st, the very next day, which is a Friday, will be the kickoff of our Leadership Academy number 32 here in Cleveland. So the next 2 cohorts are really coming, mid-fall, and I'm excited to get those up and running. So if you have any classes to make up, or any guests or coworkers or anybody you want to sponsor to send to the next classes, we would love to continue to work with your team. So please let us know if there's anything there. I think that concludes a lot of my opening comments, and I want to set up the stage here to introduce our first presenter for the day. I'm really thrilled to have the Rocky River Public Library System on board. We have been working with the library system, the Cuyahoga County Public Library System and the Cleveland Public Library System for a while now, probably for the last 10 or 15 years. But I would say within the last 3 to 5 years, we've actually had the pleasure to work with Jamie Mason and his team to kind of bring in some additional folks into the fold here. And Peter is one of those folks that came in right after Jamie came through. So he is representing the Rocky River Public Library System today. And when we were reviewing his project scope, I thought it was really interesting because you'll see here in a second, but just the libraries have changed. If you have not been to a library in the brief history, a brief past here, you should definitely go check it out, because what the libraries used to be as opposed to what they are now is pretty neat. And his whole project is about an analytical way using data to try to find the best practices of managing their collections. So it is called Collection HQ. And I love this project because it uses a lot of the tools and kind of the things that we're trying to preach here in our program about being efficient and effective. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the baton over to Peter Matera. So Peter, take it away.
All right, thank you, Rob. I appreciate the introduction. Go ahead and share my screen here. All right, so my project is titled Implementing Collection HQ, Collection Size Management and Space Utilization Planning at Rocky River Public Library. When people think of libraries, they think of books. This is a picture of Rocky River Library in 1928, the year it was built. Probably mostly books in there at that time. But even in the earliest days, libraries offered more than books in an attempt to have the materials and services that would best serve their communities. These days, with streaming music and movies, ebooks, and the ability to get materials shipped in from multiple other library systems, there's less demand for any one library to have a large physical collection in the building for browsing. Despite the shifting of needs and usage habits, Rocky River Library has not evaluated its use of space throughout the building for traditional physical materials in at least 15 years. And people use libraries for so much more now than they did then. Computers, for one thing, are ubiquitous in most libraries now. Our new strategic plan calls for a space analysis, but it would be short-sighted to do this with our physical collection sizes the way they are. This is a picture of the library in 2020, and I can tell you there are still a large number of books in there. All right, so my project will implement software called Collection HQ to generate data to provide recommendations for more appropriate collection sizes so we can make better decisions about how we use our space for the community. But first, let me provide a little context. Libraries are popular. A recent Gallup poll showed that in 2019, the average US adult was at least twice as likely to go to a library than to any of the common attractions you see here, like movie theaters or sporting events or concerts. In fact, in 2019, more people attended a library program than attended all Major League Baseball, NFL, and NBA games combined. To give you a sense of what those numbers look like, so here's a picture of Ohio Stadium that's basically at capacity. Library program attendees from 2019 would fill Ohio Stadium, which is the third largest stadium in the country, for every regular season game for the next 100 years. Ohio Stadium seats 104,944 people. There are 12 regular games in the season, so 120 games over 100 years. And when you do the math, that works out to over 125 million people who attended library programs in 2019. So don't let anyone tell you libraries are dead. They are thriving. I said earlier that when people think of libraries, they think of books, which makes sense. Libraries have thousands and thousands of books. Some of the largest libraries, like New York Public Library, have millions. This is a picture I took while visiting there last month. And when I think of my earliest library memories, I also think of books. Here's a library-related quote from one of my favorites, Matilda by Roald Dahl. And at this point in the book, the main character, Matilda, has been visiting her local public library every day for weeks, reading everything. And see if this quote resonates with any of you. This allowed her 2 glorious hours sitting quietly by herself in a cozy corner, devouring one book after another. When she had read every single children's book in the place, she started wandering around in search of something else. If you were an 80s kid like me, that something else might be vinyl LPs or a computer to play Oregon Trail. And libraries have always embraced non-traditional items. These days, if, like Matilda, you've read every book and now you're looking for something else, you might find STEM electronics, tools, games and puzzles, instruments, 3D printers, sound recording equipment, telescopes, fishing gear, cake pans, knitting needles, button makers, and much, much more. You might be able to apply for passports, take advantage of career services like resume building, attend programming for all ages, access free Wi-Fi, get technology training, and for the last few years, pick up COVID-19 test kits. The problem is, it's really hard to think beyond books, even while incorporating non-traditional materials and services, even when the community is asking the library for other things. For example, at Rocky River Library, there's been steady demand for small meeting rooms and makerspace items over the last few years. Unfortunately, it's difficult to judge whether we have enough space for that, especially when you look across the room at so many books taking up so much space. And I don't mean to just pick on books. We have large CD and DVD collections as well that aren't as necessary now as they were 10 to 15 years ago. When they need more space, libraries can rebuild, either build a branch elsewhere in the community or add on to the original site. And we've done that over the decades, making additions to that original 1928 building that you saw earlier. They can redesign or remodel the space that they have. And we did that too. In 2006, the entire first and second floors were renovated. Or they can rethink the space they have. And that's kind of where we're at now. In 2019, Rocky River Library changed its vision statement to this: leading and innovating through community-based services. And it helps put this project into context. So if it's true that when people think of libraries, they think of books, which again, books are acting as a stand-in for all physical materials in the building, and many of those people work in libraries and make decisions for libraries, there might be a framing problem. Maybe they're starting to think of all those other non-traditional items that can be borrowed, and maybe they're looking for other services that the libraries could offer. But they're looking around and seeing books everywhere. Sometimes in order to rethink, you need to reframe. So instead of framing the library as a place with books that tries to do a lot of other things, a simple framing switch might be helpful. Libraries are places that offer services, and the loaning of books is one service among many. Why? Well, over the years, patron habits have changed from a browsing model, looking at physical materials on the shelves, to an on-demand model, placing title holds and using digital materials. People are busy. They usually know what they want. So they put items on hold so they can come in, pick them up, and go on to the next thing. Also, many have embraced technology and do much of their reading with ebooks and digital audiobooks, which are often available at the tap of a button. Rocky River Library responded to that change for our community by bringing digital materials to the library in 2012 when we partnered with Overdrive. And by joining the CleveNet Consortium in 2017, among other things, we connected our patrons to over 12 million items, more than we could ever store in our building, no matter how much rethinking we might do. As you'll see in the following charts, which will show the effects of digital items and CleveNet on our circulation numbers, a lot has changed in the last 10 years. And for those who aren't familiar with the term, circulation simply refers to the number of times library materials are checked out. So before 2012, we didn't have Overdrive yet, and we hadn't joined CleveNet yet, so digital and CleveNet circulation was almost 0%. Pretty much 100% of our circulation was from items we stored in the building. You can see that on the left there, that only 2% of our circulation in 2012, the year we partnered with Overdrive, came from digital items. And then that jump between 2017 and 2018 shows the CleveNet effect, by which point 16% of our circ was from digital and CleveNet items combined. And then as you look all the way to the right, for 2022, we're projecting almost 36% of our circulation will come from CleveNet and digital items. So only 64% of circulation from items that we store in our building, and that's down from 100% only 10 years ago. Those percentages sound impressive, and they are. So here's a look at what that means in actual numbers. Before 2012, the library had only a few thousand circs from items that we didn't store in the building. You can see on the chart on the left that when we started with Overdrive in 2012, we had just under 16,000 circs from digital items. Then we joined CleveNet in 2017, and circ started to skyrocket because people could start getting things shipped from other area libraries, including from the Cleveland Public Library system, which is a huge system. And you can see the negative effect of COVID in 2020, that little dip there when we closed for a time and had limited services. For 2022, the number of circ for digital and CleveNet items we're projecting is 219,000. That's over a 1,200% increase over the last 10 years. Despite this shift, Rocky River Library has not evaluated its use of space for traditional physical materials in at least 15 years. until now. This is an excerpt from the library's 2020 strategic plan, where it says we will revisit the space analysis project with architects and staff to determine the best way to expand services. But we don't really know how much space we'll have to work with until we analyze how much space we'll need for physical circulating items. And that's really the point of this project. We're pretty sure our physical collection size is too big, but we're not sure how to decrease it strategically and how much space that would free up if we did. It's not that nothing has been done. It's just that it hasn't necessarily been done strategically in the sense that it was data-driven or intentional. In 2012, we had about 179,000 items on our shelves. In 2021, we had about 133,000, so 45,000 fewer items. But these are some of the questions we haven't asked as an organization and probably should have. Did we decrease the right collections? Did this have an adverse effect on circulation? How much lower can we go without negative consequences? And how does this affect our space? The key to this project is using data to change the size of the collections by using a single factor, balancing the percentage of total circ to the percentage of total size, which should in most cases be equal. The collection size would increase or decrease based primarily on that. And I'll have some examples of what that looks like here in a bit. But first, reducing everything to one factor is perhaps a little overconfident, and buy-in from librarians is crucial. So I don't want to de-emphasize their professional skills and judgment. I don't want this tool, one of many at their disposal, to be perceived as a threat. So let me say for the record, librarianship is a vocation that requires a master's degree from an accredited program. Librarians are trained and developed to make professional and human-centered decisions. They cannot be replaced by software. Okay, so here's the plan laid out as a SMART goal. Use Collection HQ to determine the appropriate ratio of the percentage of total circ and the percentage of total size of each of the library's circulating collections to recommend new collection sizes in preparation for a space analysis within the next 2 years. Kind of a mouthful maybe, but there it is. And what I like about the logic model is it can be complex, but it can also be basic like this, which is sometimes helpful when demonstrating a simple concept. So if we have Collection HQ, we can run reports, analyze collection sizes and usage. We can generate targeted data about usage and size, and then increase or decrease the size of our collections based on that output. And so one impact that would have is we can do the space analysis with a better understanding of how big the collection should be and potentially free up some room for services the public is looking for. So here are some of the examples I promised earlier. These are numbers I worked with in 2016 before CleveNet, when it was a little easier to do this manually. This is our graphic novels collection. So graphic novels in 2016 made up 0.30% of our total circulation, about 2,800 circs that year. But they were 0.45% of our total collection size, about 446 items. It's a difference of 0.15%. And if our target is 0%, then we need to decrease the collection size to get there. The difference favors the circulation number because that's out of our control. We can't really control how many times something is checked out, but we can control how many books are in that collection. So in this case, we would decrease by about 150 items, and the new collection size would be 296. Now, 150 books is pretty small, so let's look at an example with bigger implications. So this is our nonfiction collection. In 2016, it made up just under 8% of total circulation, about 73,800 items that year, or 800 circs that year. But it was over 23% of our total collection size, 22,885 items. Now that's a difference of over 15%. If our target is 0, we need to decrease that collection size by 15,093 books. So the new size would be 7,792. Now, 15,000 books is a lot of books. And because it's a lot of books, I do want to point out two things. One is that libraries remove books from the collection all the time. We have to because, for one thing, new books are always being published. In the library field, the process of removing books is called weeding. And again, it's something our librarians are trained to do using their professional skills. We even have a board-approved policy related to weeding. So this isn't just chaotically throwing a bunch of books away. It's an intentional process that would take many months. The second is that, due to reasons that we don't really have time to go into today, the formulas used for this generally would not have an adverse effect on circulation numbers, meaning in this example, we would still expect to get about the same amount of circulation from this collection, even with the reduced size. If it did have a negative effect, we would have to use a different target. The process is simplified for the purpose of illustrating the idea for this presentation, but in reality, it's a balancing act, and the target percentage may not always be zero, and in fact may change over time. So it's the kind of thing we would track, not just do it and be done with it. Right, so 15,000 books is a lot. A decrease of that size would open a large amount of floor space. Even if that's all we get, though, it's the equivalent of about 70 of our largest bookcases. There's about 30 or so on this slide. In some areas, that would clear an entire room, which should give us an idea of the space we'll have to work with. Now, all this sounds great, but there's something I should tell you. We tried this already, and it failed. In 2011, the library implemented Collection HQ and used it for a few years, but librarians saw it as a threat. Its purpose wasn't communicated clearly, and support fizzled out. We tried using it for a few things, but didn't even make it to using it to inform the space analysis, which is one reason why it's been delayed for so many years. Now, I was around back then too, and because I was mostly on the statistics side of things, I knew the software would be useful, but I wasn't really in a position to do much about keeping it at the time. So I thought to myself, someday there will be an opportunity to try this again. And when that day comes, we'll need a better approach. So when projects came up for PMA, it seemed like a perfect time to revisit. I pitched the idea to our director before this year's budget was approved to make sure this was on it, and secured the support and resources from administration and the board. And then I outlined the process, which in its final form would look something like this. We would start with a product demo to key staff. We would inform all of the stakeholders about the project, get approval from administration and the board, include the costs in the budget, sign the contract in a timely manner. Actually, this turned out to be crucial. We signed it in February, but I'm sure, as most of you are wondering, since I'm almost out of time and haven't shared our results yet, we weren't able to access the site in time to do that work for this presentation. Had I waited longer, it may not even have happened at all this year. We built a team, identify the right people for facilitation and influence, trying not to overstep any boundaries, but we did try to integrate levels of authority on the team. Define the purpose, here's what we want to do and why. Here's what the team is for, what the team is tasked to do, and when it's done. Organize meetings, building the site. This is Collection HQ's responsibility. That's the current stage. That's where we are now. And then after the site is built, produce and analyze the data, make recommendations to decision makers, and finally hand off the project to the collection development team. They'll use it in years to come as one of the tools among many to help them with weeding and things like that. And the key to all this the whole time has been collaboration. So here's a list of the people I got involved in this project, many of them from day one. My implementation team in bold there, they've been more involved than the others. The deputy director is actually on that team, as are staff from the adult and children's departments. And they're also on the collection development team. So I was looking for people that would tick multiple boxes. In addition to these people, there's the director and the board, the adult services and children's services managers, the rest of the collection development team, the rest of our library staff, and of course the staff of Collection HQ who build the site and will provide assistance and support. And I felt like success hinged on getting all these people working together, keeping them updated of the progress and always reminding them of the goals, why we're doing this, and preparing them for when they'll become more involved and in what way. I ran into two unexpected challenges with this project. So 2 people who were on the implementation team left the library in the middle of the project, which is fine. I wish them luck in their new jobs, but it did mean we had to bring in replacements and get them up to speed. And secondly, the Collection HQ company timeline didn't quite line up with this project as I expected, or as I had hoped, which was a little short-sighted on my part. I didn't fully appreciate how long it might take them to build our site and give us access, which is why I didn't have any real results to share with you today. However, I did just find out last week that our site is ready. So we're going to be able to start the data crunching phase this month. And I'm hoping we'll finish with that by the end of August and be able to make recommendations by fall. 2 primary benefits for this project. It meets a strategic plan goal and provides crucial data for space utilization planning. And a primary impact this will have is we expect there to be a decrease in total collection size overall, which will allow us to free up the space we'll need to meet demand for more services to the community. And my final thought is that I hope that by making its purpose transparent, by tying it to a strategic plan goal, by communicating with all stakeholders, by budgeting appropriately, by planning with enough foresight and allowing enough time, and by building a team to help with implementation, that this project has a better chance of being successful and delivering the outcomes to help us make better decisions for the community. Thank you to CSU's Public Management Academy team, Rob and Alexandra, of course, but also Dr. Madden and all the instructors, as well as everyone in cohort 8 who shared so many helpful insights over the past year. Special thank you to Kay Satula, who partnered with me to fine-tune this presentation. And with that, I am ready for questions.
Well, great job, Peter. I think this is a great project. For 2 reasons. When I started doing this kind of gig or working in this field, there's a lot of trepidation by the employees that work there that they were somehow going to be replaced or kicked to the curb or say, hey, we're just going to computerize or automate the process and we're no longer going to need you. There was also a lot of people that were using 3-ring binders and probably still are putting paper, on shelves somewhere as opposed to automating things. And from my perspective, Public Management Academy and our program is all about trying to make things more efficient, effective, but it's not about getting rid of people. It's about being able to make better informed decisions and being to be able to provide service, to the community. So I think that I love this concept because it does both, especially with the fact that you mentioned in your project that 2 people left. The more data that you have to give more tools to your employees to help, to get this done, I think that's going to be a real good benefit there. So looking forward, you mentioned a couple things that I wrote down is the fact of adding new members. So how is the project being accepted as far as the cultural aspect of things? Can you just talk about that? Are people on board with this? Do you see some pushback on that? And then secondly, when do you think you can you mentioned the fall, but when do you think this is really going to be used so you can get this thing rocking and rolling within the system?
Yeah, so I think buy-in has been pretty good. When we did the demo in last fall, actually, probably in October, we made sure that the people who would be affected were there to take another look. We still have plenty of staff. Like I said, I'm one who was there the last time, and they don't have a very good memory of that time because then it was sort of pushed on everyone in some ways, and they were kind of told to just use it, and they didn't feel like they, as you said, not that they would necessarily be replaced, but that a whole aspect of their job was being taken over by software that they didn't quite see how it all fit in. So one of the big things we're trying to do this year is include everyone from the start, make sure there's a chance to ask questions, make sure they see how it works, and clarify that it's one tool among many others. They don't have to do every single thing it says. They just need to use it to get some data to help them make those other decisions. And I think that's going fairly well. We are just starting to roll out training probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I'll have a better sense of the bigger picture for the rest of the team. There's about 12 to 15 people on the collection development team, and how that goes for them. As far as when we'll be able to do this, things tend to move slowly. I think if we can get recommendations in by the fall, we'd probably spend most of 23 doing the space analysis and planning. And, it could be till, 2024 if we're moving quickly, could be even until 2025 before we actually start clearing out furniture, right? And kind of redesigning the spaces for those new services, especially if we have to build small meeting rooms. We don't really have those in the library. We have large ones, but we don't really have small ones.
Great. Thank you, Brent. Well, I just want to say congratulations and thanks for being part of our program. I'm going to pass the baton over to Alexandra. I believe there's some questions and a couple of comments. So Alexandra, take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob. So we do have a couple questions and a couple comments. So I'm going to start with the comments first. So Kay says, great job. Looking forward to seeing the results of the entire process. Mary says, great graphics. I was on the library board in Elyria for over 12 years. Felt your pain. All right, so we do have a couple questions, and feel free to chat more questions if you'd like in the chat box or the Q&A box. So our first question is from Donna. Donna asks, is there a communications plan to help the public understand the intent, scope, and impact of this project?
That's an excellent question. There is not currently one, but there will be. We have a marketing team in the library. We'll bring some of those people into the discussion once we start understanding the scope ourselves, right? Like how big of a project it's going to be, how much it's going to affect the library. At that time, absolutely, we'll need to put something into place because everyone is going to notice if all of a sudden 15,000 books go missing and wonder why. So absolutely, that's going to be a crucial part of this as well.
Great, thank you. One of our advisory board members, Ray, asks, how often would you anticipate reanalyzing the collection using the tool?
So another very good question. I think, so it's sort of an ongoing, we'd be able to create targets and on an ongoing basis, see how close we are or how far off the mark we are from those targets. So my hope is that it can be sort of a rolling, ongoing thing. So there's not these major shifts, say every 5 or 10 years, but also do like a 5 or maybe 8-year relook at everything comprehensively and see if that has any effect on a larger scale. So we're expecting the initial use of this software, there's going to be large consequences most likely, but on an ongoing basis, hopefully they'll be smaller and we'll be able to be a little bit more responsive.
Great, thank you. So your fellow cohort member, Sean, asks, does Collection HQ use algorithms in their software to provide the insights? And do you have concerns about the algorithms' unintentional bias as other software algorithms have demonstrated?
Yeah, that's a concern for sure. I think that's where the librarian's professional judgment comes into play. Collection HQ is going to say, all right, these things haven't circulated in so many years, get rid of them. But if those things are the classics or things that are, libraries determined to be crucial to be part of our collection, like the dictionary, maybe it never gets checked out, but it's getting used all the time in the library, they'll know that and won't get rid of it. It uses a lot of data crunching. They do have some algorithms involved in collection recommendations. So there's a whole module related to this software that can identify gaps and recommend books that might fill those gaps. There's a DEI component to the software where it uses the BISAC subject groupings to find your strengths and weaknesses in a collection from a DEI perspective. So some of those algorithms definitely come into play. And I think that's why it's so important that the librarians understand that it's not just do what it says, it's consider what it says, and then use your judgment, which is what you're here for, to make the right decisions.
Great. And finally, we have one comment and one last question. So I'll start with the comment from Eric. Eric says your presentation was really nice. You did a good job as the presenter. Your pacing of everything was really good. It didn't feel rushed at all.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Eric. And then we have one more question from an attendee. As change has occurred, are you gathering feedback from patrons and public?
That would be our intention. I think at this point, we're not quite there yet. So now that we have access to the site, we'll be able to start running the numbers and see what kind of effect it will have. We definitely, as part of our strategic plan that was covering 2020 through 2024 or so, we got a lot of feedback from the patrons and the public at large. And that's where we learned of some of these things like, oh, they need small meeting rooms where just a few people can meet or one person can use the room. They want makerspace items. A lot of that stuff is very expensive for people to purchase on their own. And a lot of libraries do provide that. Akron Library, for example, has a large makerspace area. Cleveland Public does, and it's very popular. So once we get that feedback, it's good to have, right? A couple years back, look, for years, people have been asking for this. Here's how we're going to accomplish it. And yes, making sure that we communicate that out and making sure that things haven't changed again, right? So probably before we make any major decisions, we would poll the community again to see what we're doing.
Thank you. And as you were answering that last question, we had one more comment come in from Tiffany. Loved the focus on the library as a community centerpiece, which we can forget.
Mm-hmm.
And that is it in terms of questions and comments.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter. Great job. So before we pass the baton over to our next presenter and call Katie, I wanted to give a quick shout out. Alexandra mentioned one of our advisory board members, Ray. So I wanted to just let everybody know that Ray Justice, who's the administrator for the Ohio Department of Administrative Services. He is the administrator for the Learning and Talent Development Division. So that's sort of like the training and the professional development division for the state of Ohio is part of our board, and he's joining us today. So I want to just give a quick shout out to Ray to say welcome to today, welcome, and appreciate your support on the board. And I think it's perfect timing that we transition from Ray over to our first state level employee. This is what I mentioned earlier, the concept of starting to cross-fertilize and bring different divisions and different agencies together. Katie Waklowski, who will be presenting today, works at the Ohio Department of Public Safety. She works at the Ohio Narcotics Intelligence Center as a supervisor, and her project revolves around the concept of training for analysts. So I'm excited to have her present today. And also, Katie, thank you for joining our cohort and bringing in your perspective as an individual, but bringing in that state level perspective as well. So without further ado, I'll let you get into more detail of what your actual presentation is all about and your project. But thank you for everything, and take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Katie Waklowski. I am a Public Safety Intelligence Manager for the Ohio Narcotics Intelligence Center, or ONIC, at the Ohio Department of Public Safety. Today, I'm going to briefly provide you information related to my project on developing an internal analytic training program at ONIC. A quick background on ONIC. We were established by the state in 2019, so a fairly new organization to provide forensics and intelligence support to law enforcement across the state, specifically related to drug investigations. And my project specifically focuses on the intelligence portion of ONIC's mission. And in 2019, we were established in 2 locations, Columbus and Cleveland, to provide support to the entire state. So as I mentioned, we started as a brand new unit, but we didn't have a formal internal training program, and we relied heavily on the experience of staff and external trainings that were available. But since our establishment, COVID occurred, significantly limiting our in-person trainings. But we also doubled in size from 2 to 4 offices. So we now also have locations in Toledo and Cincinnati. And although being somewhat unknown, we are in high demand around the state and just anticipate that to continue. So with the expansion, which brings newer and sometimes less experienced analysts and in-person training still being somewhat limited as a result of COVID, we wanted to develop a formalized internal training program that would set a baseline standard of knowledge for ONIC analysts, and in that ensure products are uniform across all of our 4 offices. And my project focuses specifically on one portion of this training program, which is developing products that include sound judgments and use of analytic language. And I will go into more detail on what those terms mean later. First, though, I want to define a few things for those that are not familiar with intelligence or intelligence analysts. What we are not is James Bond or those TV shows that magically manage to solve a crime in an hour, including commercial breaks. Intelligence takes time, and processing that also takes time. So our investigations can go on for as long as 2-3 years. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence, or ODNI, defines intelligence as information that is gathered within or outside of the United States and involves threats to our nation, its people, property, or interests. Furthermore, intelligence can provide insights not available elsewhere that warn of threats and opportunities and inform individuals of security threats. Intelligence can be a lot of things, so to boil it down and simplify it, intelligence is information that has been analyzed and once finalized is in its most useful format. I've heard the statement before that intelligence is like putting a puzzle together and that it can provide investigators with missing pieces of their case and help develop new leads. Only it's a puzzle where all the cardboard side is up and you're slowly flipping it over. But some of your puzzle pieces are missing and pieces from other puzzles are getting mixed in. But ultimately, intelligence provides the investigator with those missing pieces to their case to help develop new leads. And that's what analysts do. We look through that information, distill what is most important, organize it, and place it in a logical format for the investigator, making it its most useful format. With that information, ONIC has different modules within our training program that we have been building out. And the first part we worked on is our initial onboarding as we've grown and developed. So again, my portion incorporates my experience working in the federal intelligence community and how the federal intelligence community writes its products using specific standards from Intelligence Community Directive 203 or ICD 203. This establishes the intelligence community's analytic standards that govern the production and evaluation of analytic products. Within this standard are 9 analytic tradecraft standards that include analytic language, which is standard 2, and clear and logical argumentation, standard 6. And these 2 are really the cornerstones of developing a sound analytic product. So when I talk about a product or product development, I'm talking about how we develop and display our analytic findings for the investigator. This includes ensuring our judgments or our conclusions in the product are sound and have evidence that support them within the product. And then whenever I use the term analytic language, there are certain words that analysts use to show or cue someone that they're making a judgment. These terms can include unlikely, likely, probably, almost certainly, just to name a few of them. And these statements are then followed by the evidence that support our judgment or conclusion. And this is what can be defined as the clear and logical argumentation for our analysis. So for a quick example on what we're looking for, let's use the weather. A weatherman might say there's a 70% chance of rain today. An analyst would do the following instead using analytic language and clear and logical argumentation. We would say it would likely rain today using our judgment language that's provided with the term likely. And then we would show our evidence to support our conclusion on why it will rain today. So we could say the sky is getting dark as a piece of evidence. The wind is picking up from the west. The direction storms usually come from this time of year. The weatherman this morning predicted rain. And my mother, who lives an hour west of here, if you trust her, says it's raining at her house, and therefore the storm is going to come our way. So again, the term likely cues you to it being a judgment. And then we have our bullets that support our conclusion there. And so this is what we're really trying to do with our product. So again, using the ICD as a guide, I developed a training that would help ensure our products were consistent across all offices, including the use of analytic language, and that they have that clear and logical argumentation component. Currently, I have developed and provided a 1.5 hour introduction to analytic language and product development training to all current and new analysts as they onboard with us. This training occurs every time we get a new analyst, which is it's been on average about every 2 weeks since February. And then the training will continue as we get all of our new staff and current staff trained up. We are also requiring analysts to attend a monthly 1.5 hour series on analytic language and product development that is hosted by an external agency. So it's a webinar, but it reinforces the concepts and language used in the introduction to analytic writing and product development that they're receiving at ONIC. A couple weeks ago, we identified the need to send a survey to the analysts to get feedback on the areas of analytic language where they're still struggling because it is a newer concept to them. And so we want to use that to build out a 1-day additional training, incorporating their feedback and looking specifically at their areas of concern. And the goal is then to host that 1-day training in August or September. And this training will also be used to gauge where the analysts are with their comfort with using analytic language and determine who might need additional training and how we can provide that to them. And then we will continue as we move forward to provide additional trainings and concepts for the analysts. So this is what we have done so far and where we currently are, and then our goal over the next few months within our growing agency. And with that, are there any questions?
Thanks, Katie. So you mentioned in the presentation about the current and new employees. I know that the Great Resignation is currently going across the country. So can you just talk real quick about how many new folks are on board as far as coming into the organization, how many folks you're currently training? Is this going to give us an overview of kind of what that looks like as far as the transition plans for the current and new folks?
Yeah,
how many folks are being impacted by this?
absolutely. That's a great question. So each of our offices mirror each other. So we have 5 state analysts in each office. So 20 total there, but Columbus has an additional 2 analysts. And then we also have National Guard members who sit with us. And so we have about 30 to 35 analysts plus managers at each office that are getting trained up. So to date, we have probably trained about 25 of those individuals, with about 5 to 10 still needing it as they get hired.
Is there additional training? You mentioned an external part. Is there additional components to this as well?
Yes, there are. So since I started my project, which was the goal of developing an entire internal training, we have hired a training manager. And so that is why my project is focused on one module specifically. So we do have other modules within our onboarding training. And then that training manager is responsible for them building out our training program more completely.
Okay, great. I believe that there are some questions and some comments in the chat. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Alexandra real quick and see if we can get that part of the conversation started.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Rob. So we do have a few questions and comments. Our first question comes from Donna. Donna asks, what has been your biggest challenge with the training implementation? I can't imagine onboarding people so quickly.
Yes, so that has been one of the challenges, is that Unfortunately, we're continuing to tweak it as we do a new round of training each time, just because of the speed that this has occurred and the number of people. And so that plus providing what is basically teaching you to write in a different way than you've been taught your entire life, which has been, here's everything I found, and then here's my conclusion. And now we're flipping that. And I've been doing this for 10 years and I still find myself writing that way, but I've, over the past 10 years, have had experience and training that's allowed me to catch when I'm doing it and then change that. So that is definitely one of our biggest challenges, is just changing the mindset of what we've done our entire lives.
Great, thank you so much. So we have another question. So I'm gonna slightly rephrase the question because I think this is what they're asking. So I believe this person is asking if building the 1.5 hour into an on-demand item for new analysts to view upon hire has been more effective rather than taking the time every 2 weeks or so to deliver.
Yeah, so we have had those conversations. We want to have the in-person because that allows them to ask the questions with us, and then you can gauge also where there might be confusion just based on their facial expressions and stuff like that, and go into different areas where maybe they have more questions than another person would. But I think the plan is to eventually record all of our sessions so the analysts have them at their disposal if they ever need to look back at them again. But we do want to have that initial face-to-face. And even though it is a heavy ask, it's still worth it to introduce the in-person, this new concept in person the first time around. We do see the value in that. But yes, the goal is to record them at one point so then the analyst can access them at any point when needed for review.
Great, thank you. So your classmate Eric has a very important question and some comments. So Eric said that he really liked your graphics. You did a good job presenting the subject matter. Like the previous speaker, your pacing was good and didn't feel rushed. Like the bits of humor as well. And he has a very serious question. He wants to know who painted the owl.
Oh, I did. It was a wine and design.
Great question, Eric. All right. So we do have one more question currently in the queue, but we do have a few more minutes. So if you do have a question or comment from Katie, please feel free to chat that in the Q&A box or the chat box. All right, so Jared asks, is there a system in place for collecting and implementing feedback?
So we have, with our customers, we do have a customer survey from that point of view. From the analyst's perspective to what they're being trained on, we do not, and that's why we want to develop this survey to send out to the analyst. Right now, the feedback has been just from the analysts themselves whenever talking to different management, and then we receive that feedback that way.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, as you were answering that, an attendee asks if you're gathering feedback from staff, and do you observe increased turnaround or matriculation given the speed and onboarding?
So I would say that the increased speed is difficult for us to determine because each case is unique, and depending on the amount of information we have to get through, as well as the customer's request, really drives how quickly we can get something done. There are certain requests that if we are asked, we do expect a turnaround within 24 hours, let's say, but there are others that can take much longer to process just based on the amount of information that's provided and that we are looking at. So that is really challenging to be able to determine. We do want to get quicker and we do want to get our products out faster. Just unfortunately, we can't say, hey, this needs to be done within a week for every type of X that we're asked, just because it is so dependent on the volume of information we're looking at. So unfortunately, while yes, speed, we would like to improve, we just can't say that we have. And I don't think that we'll ever reach that point. But I think maybe the better part to look at is going to be the comfort level of the analyst in using this language and this process. And that's something that we hope they will get more and more comfortable with over time.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to take a quick pause in case anyone else wants to chat any last minute questions or comments, just because we still do have a few more minutes. Rob, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Is there that last one in the chat box, is that new?
No,
Or
I
is
believe
that-
we addressed that. Yes.
Okay, cool. My only comment is back to Katie, is like you mentioned in your description that this was this training center opened up in 2019, and that was obviously right before the pandemic. So I would imagine that there's been a tremendous amount of growing pains and then challenges and then just dealing with the pandemic. So I just wanted to throw out a question about just how is everybody adapting to the constant change within your organization and constantly trying to establish yourself or identify, as far as identity and this kind of the new changes. So how is that working from a culture perspective within all the different things you're dealing with there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we got up and running right before the pandemic hit, and then it was a lot of working from home. I think some good that came out of it was a number of the trainings did go to virtual, but you do lose something with the in-person that you just don't get in the virtual that's there in the in-person. So there were pluses to it with a lot of trainings that were in person and maybe in different states that we before couldn't attend. We could now, but then you also, again, like I was saying, lose that in-person one. But and I would say that we did a pretty good job being successful for the fact that we doubled in size in the 3 years. And part of that was a pandemic. So clearly there's value added with it. But there's definitely, you're going to have those growing pains as we get new people onboarded and get these new offices up and running as well. But I think overall it's been a positive trajectory. People have seen the value of us. And I think overcoming these challenges has just helped set us up for success. And we have management that is just so supportive in everything that we are doing and our biggest cheerleaders. And so that in itself is just, I think, very helpful for these staff to see and helps us and keep our morale high as well.
That's good. Well, good luck as you continue to establish yourself as a new organization. So our center was established in 2018. So we're right there with you as far as trying to, that every day is the new normal. So keep up the good work.
So just one more comment from Mary. So Mary just comments that you certainly know that data thoroughly. All right, so it looks like we don't have any other questions or comments. So back to you, Rob.
I just want to say great job to Peter and Katie so far. I think you start off on a high note. And I also want to say that I really love the fact that we had a library and the Department of Public Safety. So as we continue on here with the presentations today, I wanted to recognize one of our other state agencies and other state partners that is in the fold now, I guess you could say, a part of the family, and that is the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. Ms. Sandra Hollingsworth is going to be presenting today, and she's going to be talking about the concept of creating refugee mental health programs for the active refugees that are joining us in the state of Ohio. I think it's a timely project, especially as you hear about the war in Ukraine and all the turmoil across the globe. And I'm glad to hear that Ohio has programs to support these folks that come into our state. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to Sandy. Take it away.
I'm Sandy Hollingsworth with Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, and my project was the development of a refugee mental health program to improve access to mental health in refugee communities. Before I go into the aspects of my project, I first wanted to give you a story of a refugee journey to help you better understand the needs for mental health. This is Amina's story. Amina was pregnant when she started her long, winding, and arduous journey in October of 1991 with her husband and 2 sons. She traveled for weeks to reach the Kenyan border. Along the way, her infant son died from the measles, and her husband was gunned down by a militia group. Amina's daughter was born a few months later at a refugee camp on the coast of Kenya. In March of 1997, the ongoing tensions between Kenyan villagers and Somali refugees escalated. One day, when Amina left her children at school to go to the market, the locals set fire to the camp. Amina's children smelled the smoke and ran 4 kilometers until they found a woman who used to buy goods from their mother and who took them in. They were reunited with Amina the same fateful day, but the others were not so lucky, as several of their friends were killed in the fires. The United Nations closed that refugee camp and sent Amina and her family to the Kukuma refugee camp in northern Kenya. When her daughter was asked, "What is it like to grow up in Kukuma?" she shrugged and said, "I can't complain. It is life." 18 years after she fled her home, Amina's family is allowed to resettle in the US. At the airport, they are met by a caseworker from the local resettlement agency. Their only possessions are contained in this simple white bag. They are taken to their new apartment that was set up for them. They were given beds and the most basic necessities. Once resettled in the US, they will need to learn English, look for work, and learn how to navigate their new city, which is very different from the home in which they had to flee. So my project is the development of a refugee mental health program. Because mental health is such an important aspect of individuals' well-being and refugees are often experience multiple barriers to mental health, I decided to focus my program on the development of a mental health program. The objective of this program would be to improve the access of mental health services in refugee communities. My project is a longer project that is not quite completed. In order to implement a new program within ODJFS, it's a very time-consuming project. So I'm going to refer back to my timeline throughout this presentation and kind of go through the different steps of what I've done so far and then what I will be doing in the future. So the first aspect was the planning stage. So this project started officially when we received notification from our federal counterpart that we were going to receive $340,000 in federal funding to fund a refugee mental health initiative. Once I received that information of funding, I then had to start gathering information, developing program requirements, and releasing an RFGA or request for a grant agreement. The request for a grant agreement is an application process that we use to select providers within the state of Ohio. I then moved on to the implementation stage on or around April 15th. So this phase is where we actually selected the providers from the applications we received in the RFGA. We drafted the grant agreements, held kickoff meetings, and did all the things to get the program ready to start. The official start date was July 1st, which was just last week. So that's when our providers that were selected were allowed to start their programming and all work for the program. So our next steps that will be along the way that I still have planned are the data review phase, which will consist of data collection, federal reports, and program evaluation. And then in July of 2023, being able to renew the program and look at areas to improve. The initial part of the planning phase consisted of conducting a needs analysis. So refugees in general have higher rates of PTSD, depression, anxiety, and have what we refer to as the multi-trauma experience, as you saw in Amina's story. This is compared to US-born individuals and other immigrants that come to the United States. Along with the higher rates of PTSD, depression, and anxiety, they also have multiple barriers to receiving mental health services. The first one is a cultural stigma. In most of our refugee cultures, discussing mental health is very stigmatized and it's looked down upon. In some cultures, having mental health needs can actually get you ostracized from the community. The second one is lack of information. A lot of the refugees just don't have information about what mental health and emotional wellness is and what they can do to improve those aspects of their life. The third one is transportation. So transportation is a huge issue for any of our refugee programming. When refugees first come to the US, they don't have cars or driver's license, and it often takes them a while to work on those things. Also, it's very difficult for them to navigate public transportation, as a lot of them still have language needs, and public transportation can also be confusing. They lack knowledge of the US medical system. So the US medical system is considered very complex compared to other medical systems throughout the world. And it's very hard to learn how to navigate that as far as like insurance and scheduling appointments and where you would need to go for the different medical needs that you have. There's also a lack of cultural competency of mainstream mental health providers. A lot of mainstream mental health providers have not studied or learned about the various cultures within our refugee communities and how to address mental health within those cultures, and then language needs. So mental health services, to provide for refugee communities, you often will have to work with an interpreter, and a lot of mainstream mental health providers don't have a lot of experience in working with interpreters and how to find interpreters that are medically qualified to interpret. So after the needs analysis, there was some information gathering that had to take place. So the first step was looking at the federal regulations for funding. So when we received the funding, we received federal regulations for that specific funding, but then there's also federal regulations for utilizing any federal funds that had to be reviewed. So when we were doing the development of the program, we were making sure that we were meeting all of the federal regulations. I then attended multiple learning sessions on mental health in refugee communities to find out what other communities have been doing and if there was any methodologies that have been previously utilized on refugee communities. I also conducted outreach to current service providers within the refugee communities that currently work with refugee communities to find out from them what they felt like were major gaps in refugees receiving mental health. And then I did a review of arrival data on refugees. This was important to determine which cities would be able to receive the funding and where we would have the program. So the $340,000 is not nearly enough to establish programs in all of the cities that resettle refugees throughout Ohio. So we needed to focus that down and determine which cities that we would be providing services to. So after all of this data collection and information gathering, the question that I proposed is how can we improve refugee access to mental health services in Ohio? And I decided on 3 different aspects. The first one was increasing mental health literacy in refugee communities. This will be through mental health literacy classes, which will be large groups of individuals that will be taught mental health topics. The second one, we would be providing training on cultural competencies of mental health providers. So within the program, there will be opportunities to develop cultural competency training and to provide those trainings to mental health providers within the community. And then the third one is the creation of wellness groups targeted to improve emotional well-being of refugees. So the first 2 can potentially take longer to increase refugee access. They are time-consuming and will require multiple attempts. I mean, it's not just a one and done. But the creation of the wellness group will allow us to start working with refugees now to increase their emotional well-being without needing all of the additional regulations that you would need as a mainstream mental health provider. So wellness groups are generally groups that will focus on 6 to 8 individuals, and they will discuss issues of emotional well-being and do things like just engagement, having people join together, work on getting to know the community and other things that can increase individuals' emotional well-being. So during PMA, a couple of the questions that we were tasked with answering is, how does this program benefit the community, which I think everyone can agree that access to mental health is an extraordinary benefit to any community. But I wanted to specifically look at how it benefits Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. So ODJFS's mission is to improve the well-being of Ohio's workforce and families by promoting economic self-sufficiency and ensuring the safety of Ohio's most vulnerable citizens. In order for an individual to be economically self-sufficient, they have to have good mental health. An individual that is experiencing severe PTSD, anxiety, and depression is not going to be able to support their family and sustain a job in order to achieve economic self-sufficiency, which is why this program is so important to Ohio Department of Job and Family Services mission. Back to the timeline. So the next phase of the project was the implementation portion of this project. So under the implementation, so we selected providers for both Cleveland and Columbus through the request for grant agreement process. So in the analysis of the data review of arrivals, it was determined that Cleveland, Columbus, and Akron were our highest receiving cities. Originally within the RFGA, we had requested for applications for Akron as well. However, we did not receive any applications for Akron, so I decided to move forward and just focus on Cleveland and Columbus to begin implementing this program. The next phase was once the providers were selected through this application process, and I should say that an RFGA is a competitive bid process, so individuals have to complete an application, and those applications are scored based off of their responses. So then we needed to draft the grant agreement. So drafting grant agreement consisted of working with our legal services staff, developing the deliverables, and going over the information with the legal service staff so they could draft the grant agreement. I then had to review those grant agreements, send them out for review to the new providers, get the signatures, and request purchase orders. The next phase of the implementation, the kickoff meeting, was actually delayed. It was supposed to be held in June. But as Rob had mentioned, the crisis in Ukraine and the crisis before that with Afghanistan, things have been really busy, so we had to delay that. So we're actually holding the kickoff meeting in about 2 weeks. And the kickoff meeting will consist of meeting with the providers to discuss all of the information about the program and what it is that they should be focused on and allowed to do. So a lot of times, and applications that we receive are written by someone completely different than who's going to be providing services. So it's important to meet with the individuals at that agency that are directly providing services so they have an understanding of what it is that was proposed for them to do, and make sure that everyone is kind of on the same level playing field in order and understanding what the outcomes are supposed to be. And then the program started on July 1st of 2022. So just last week, the program providers were notified that they were allowed to start the program. So they do get an adjustment period to ensure that they have staff in place. So we allow them 30 days from the start of the program of July 1, but July 1 is when they can start billing for services and activities, which include some of the setup activities. Within this project and from the class, I utilized a logic model. So the logic model that I utilized was specifically for developing deliverables and outcomes that we were going to expect the providers to meet. So some of the resources that were identified were the funding, which we did receive, development of training and curriculum, interpreters, having community buy-in, space, and childcare, and then activities of developing wellness groups, creating pre and post surveys, securing community space, securing childcare, and creating the cultural competency training. So outputs and outcomes. So output is to create 6 wellness groups for newly arrived refugees per city, with an outcome expected of 70% participation of referred individuals, conducting monthly mental health literacy classes with pre and post surveys conducted for each class, with an outcome of participants being able to show an increase in knowledge. The same with the cultural competency trainings being conducted once per quarter, and those participants being able to show an increased base of knowledge. So with the impacts being a strong new refugee community that understands the importance of wellness and how to navigate their new home, and that mental health providers will be confident in working with refugee communities to address mental health. From that logic model, we developed our SMART outcomes, or I developed the SMART outcomes, which are included in the deliverable section. So each provider has to conduct 6 wellness groups with an average of 6 to 8 individuals per group. So that's over the span of the 1 year of the project. And then each provider will conduct monthly mental health literacy classes of a minimum of 1 class per month. And then each provider will create cultural competency trainings for mental health providers and conduct trainings at least once per quarter. So that is the planning and implementation. And then of course the program started on July 1st. And then we move into the data review phase. So I will discuss what I have planned for the data review. So the first portion is the data collection. So we're going to collect participant demographic data for both the mental health literacy and on the wellness group. So we're going to collect things like age, number of months in the US, country of origin, language. I went ahead and included some samples of some other programs that we currently run and some data that we've collected from those. So within our data collection, one of the reasons we focus on primary language is to look for gaps in communities that we may not be serving. We want to make sure that our services are aligning with the percentages of individuals that we have resettled that speak those languages. As you can tell for this number, this was a much larger program, a lot more well-funded. We will not be reaching out to this many people with the refugee mental health program. And another aspect we look at is the number of months between their arrival to the US and their need or their use of service. As time kind of goes on, individuals are less likely to engage with us as they're here in the US, and their needs often change. So it's good for us to look at those 2 data points. And so those are just 2 of the data points that we'll be looking at, but we will be collecting more. And then the survey. So part of the deliverables was for each of the providers to create pre and post surveys for the mental health literacy classes. However, for the wellness groups, there is already a tool that we are going to utilize. So this is the Refugee Health Screener 15. This is a self-assessment tool to gauge your level of PTSD, anxiety, and depression. This tool has already been translated into 16 or 17 different languages. And because it's a self-assessment tool, it's easy to utilize. So it will be given at the beginning of the wellness groups and at the end of the wellness group, so we can measure the individual self-reported changes in PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And after the surveys, evaluations, we're gonna evaluate that the outcomes have been met. We need to ensure that each of the outcomes that are specified in The grant agreements are being met, and those will be reviewed continuously to make sure that everyone is on track. I will be monitoring expenditures, make sure that people are spending their money and the way that it should be spent on allowable items, but also make sure that they're not going to run out before the year and that they're not going to have funding left over at the end of the year. And then part of the renewal process, we're going to be taking all the information that was collected and look for gaps in areas that we can improve. So we want to look for, you know, did we miss out on a particular group of refugees that we have? Are there things that we can do to engage more refugees? Are we not getting the participation that we were expecting? And then finally, the last thing we will look for in the renewal period is expansion possibilities and leveraging additional funding. So we're hoping that we do have the positive outcomes that we are expecting, and that we will be able to utilize those outcomes to apply for additional funding and request additional funding in order to expand this program into additional cities, or even to just do additional outreach within the cities that we are currently serving. So that is where I am at with the refugee mental health program, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
First of all, I think it's great that you worked on this project, and also too that we have this available because of just the global circumstances that we have. It sounds like it's a necessary item. I was not concerned. My question was about the outcomes. You mentioned outcomes. What are those? Can you give me some examples of what outcomes look like, and how do you track to see if the services are effective and then it's actually helping the customers that are receiving these services?
Yeah, so for the outcomes, I mean, it'll be a lot of the measurements using the pre and post surveys and then the RHS 15. So we will be looking at like participation and then the completion of those pre and post surveys to ensure that the programming that we are doing is making is having an effect on the community, that we are able to increase individuals' understanding of refugee mental health, and then also decrease the levels of PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And then for the mainstream mental health providers, I had trouble determining like a good outcome besides the measuring of their level of understanding of refugee communities. Because mental health is such a hard thing to track as far as utilization of services, because it's very, there's HIPAA laws, and, they just can't share that back with us. So for those outcomes, it would mainly be the engagement of the mental health providers and their participation in the cultural competency classes.
Okay, thank you. Great. Alexandra, I'm going to pass over to you because I believe there are several comments and questions. So over to you.
Great, thank you, Rob. So our first question comes from Brian. Brian states, wow, I had no idea that mental health issues are such a problem in the refugee community. Are there any similar mental health initiatives elsewhere in the U.S.?
Yeah, so there are similar mental health initiatives. So when this funding was actually passed out, it was given to a lot of states that have high numbers of refugee resettlement. So a lot of states are developing programs now, but there have been ongoing programs throughout the years. So one of the programs that's the most famous is at Bellevue Hospital, that focuses on the trauma of refugees and treating that trauma through trauma-informed care. So it's a more expanded program because it's an actual mental health facility that has kind of specialized in doing outreach to refugee and immigrant communities. There's also a program that was developed several years ago out of Harvard, which is called the Family Strengthening Initiative. And it works with refugee families as a whole and focuses on school-age children and their families, and provides them with various lessons and life skills that are designed to improve the family's mental health by reducing stress.
Thank you. So an attendee asks, I'm wondering if there is value in engaging potential participants through the local refugee community centers.
Yeah, so there definitely is value in that. So the two contracted providers are actually refugee resettlement agencies. So they have direct connections with refugees. When we did the solicitation for applications, we actually did include some of our ethnic-based community centers. We did not receive any applications from those, but definitely working with those community centers, because we do often find that if you are able to engage with the community leaders and if you can get their stamp of approval, refugees are much more willing to attend your program.
So Ray asks a two-part question. What might be the implications longer term if the funding is not renewed? And then also, are there opportunities to partner with other state agencies or state resources, such as mental health and addiction services?
So the implications if the funding doesn't get renewed would actually be pretty devastating for us. So we have worked with our federal counterpart and explained to them the importance of needing this funding for a very long time. I started as a refugee health coordinator in 2013, and since that time, this has always been a topic, and we have always requested for this funding. So if they were to take it away after even 1 year, it would be devastating because we do need time to get things going. I do eventually hope that we are able to do some partnerships with mental health and addiction services, or even the county level of those, like the county Adams boards and those kind of partnerships. I think it would be very helpful. They do have a lot of things going on. When we've engaged with them in the past, their programming isn't specific to refugees and doesn't really have the language needs. But definitely, if we are able to get this program going and be able to show them, what kind of access we can provide to a refugee community if we do address these barriers, it would be a great place to partnership.
Excellent. So I do have two more questions and then a couple comments. So if you do have a question for Sandy, now is the time to share it. So given the stigma associated with mental health, how do you plan to garner feedback beyond survey responses?
Yeah, so that's a difficult question. So a lot of individuals are very closed off to mental health services in general, which is why the wellness groups where we can focus on just emotional wellness without using stigmatizing terms like depression or anxiety. We're hoping that we can gather, good feedback as far as that goes. But we're just not certain. Like we know, what we need to do and, the barriers and how to get individuals to understand, hopefully through the mental health literacy, that it's not something that should be stigmatized, that it's very reasonable to expect that individuals that have had multi-event traumas to have those feelings, and that it's not your fault. That we're hoping that we can get that community engagement, but until we, start moving forward and look for those gaps, we won't really have a true understanding.
Great. So Kay has a comment and then a question. Sandy, great presentation, much needed program. Is there a process in place to match the refugees with volunteer sponsors from the US who could help the refugees with the culture shock and other assistance with living in the US?
So yes and no. So the resettlement agencies, when they do refugee resettlement, they do utilize caseworkers, but they most generally utilize caseworkers they've gotten from the refugee communities themselves. There is a community sponsorship program and resettlement agencies that utilize volunteers, and those volunteers, will get assigned a family. They typically, if they're going to do that, they look for a group of volunteers because it's time consuming and there's a lot of needs for one individual. and kind of work as community navigators. But that's not done widely. It would be great if it was, and that there was more studies. I know, like in Connecticut, like that's their only model, is using this community sponsor model. But it hasn't been pushed out throughout the US. With the Afghans and Ukrainians, it's being pushed out more, but it just hasn't been, how things were typically done within refugee resettlement.
Great. In the interest of time, just want to have one more question, and then I'll quickly read through the comments. Josh asks, is it possible for someone to volunteer or for you to hire interns to assist with this program? I'm sure students would jump at the opportunity.
Yeah, so I don't have the capability of hiring interns, and they kind of limit us on volunteers within our agency, but definitely the resettlement agencies that we've contracted with do have the capability of hiring interns. They often utilize interns to complete a lot of the study work because interns love that. They often need stuff for their projects and that kind of stuff. And they also do engage volunteers on a pretty regular basis to assist with things, specifically like transportation needs and that kind of thing. Things that a volunteer can simply do that may be a huge barrier for the refugee themselves. So it is done, just not usually at the state level.
Thank you. A couple comments. Peter said, it sounds like you were the perfect person to lead this project. Great job walking us through everything. Excellent presentation. Mary says, so glad that your agency is tackling this issue. And Eric says, nice job on your presentation as well. Everyone is knocking them out of the park. Really liked your content and appreciate the importance of the problem you're trying to address. So we have one more question, but for the sake of time, I'm gonna defer to Rob. Do we have time to answer this one last question, or do you want to keep rolling through the next presentation?
Just answer it real quick and then we can rock and roll.
Okay, certainly. So beyond the grant, how will the services and tracking be funded?
So right now they're only being funded through this grant. We definitely hope to leverage other money, including state funds, but right now, with the program just starting out, we're using the federal grant dollars that we were given.
Great, thank you so much, Sandy, great job.
Thank you.
Great job, Sandy. I think, as I said earlier, with all this global issues going on, this is a really important project, and so wish you best of luck. I do want to put a plug out for the reason why I love OCPM, and that is to connect dots between the various agencies. So you mentioned the fact of some of the projects or some of the impact at the local level, and we have a partnership with the local Adams board. Scott Osicki, who is the CEO, and several other folks have actually gone through the Leadership Academy portion of the program. So if there's any way that we can help connect the dots, I'm sure you're already working with the local folks, but if there's any way that we can help connect the dots through the network that we have to help you with this in Cuyahoga County, at least, let me know. Be happy to do that. So great project. And that is one of the outcomes that I want to see is this collaboration with the various government entities at all levels, throughout the state of Ohio. So look forward to hearing about results down the road and the impact that you're having as you move forward. All right, let's transition. It's 10 o'clock. We're right on time. Our next presenter is from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, which is obviously another state agency that we like to say thank you to the sponsor for participating. And I'm going to pass the baton over to Jared Craig, who is working on the creation of recreational hunting maps for all of the Ohio State forests. So Jared, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Are you able to see everything okay?
We're all set. Looks
all right,
good.
Perfect. Yeah, so today excited to talk about this project that we were able to do and get started, kind of as a product of PMA this year. So the creation of recreational hunting maps for our state forests. So a little bit of background on the Ohio Division of Forestry. So We were actually one of the first divisions within the Department of Natural Resources, and even existed before that department existed as its own standalone thing. So have been around for a long time, close to 100 years now at this point. And through that time, the mission has kind of stayed the same, of trying to promote and apply management for sustainable forestry on our forest lands throughout the state. And with that as well, the vision being, that we want to see, all citizens of Ohio being able to use our diverse forests and our healthy forests for the benefits that those are able to provide. And so within our Division of Forestry, we have kind of several arms of that. One of which is helping private landowners manage their properties. We also have an urban forestry arm of the division that deals with cities and municipalities to help them with their programs and managing street trees and those sorts of things. And then we also have a forest health program statewide that helps with invasive species treatment and assistance to different entities around the state. But my role specifically is in what we call the land management program. And so what that branch of the division focuses on is really just the management of our 24 state forests throughout Ohio. The vast majority of those are located in the southeast part of the state, and some in the east. And then we also have one up in Mohican and one at Maumee. But those 24 state forests combined make up about 200,000 acres of forest land throughout the state, which makes us one of the largest landholding agencies within the state, and just as a whole, just one of the largest landowners, period. And so we're privileged to be able to manage those lands and be able to provide benefits for Ohioans and visitors to the state. And so one of our core principles and guiding practices is what we call multiple use management. And what that entails is being able to manage the forest to try and maximize the benefit of those. So, we are unique and separate from the state parks, whereas those are more focused on a recreation side of things. Our state forests, while incorporating recreation, also have an active timber program for sustainable harvesting of timber products. We manage for wildlife resources. And then along with that recreation, we try and consider the aesthetics of those operations as well. And since we are such a large landholding agency, we understand that we have a lot of environmental impact along with that. And so we always are keenly aware of the environmental services that our lands lend themselves to, and are always cognizant of that as well. And so thinking at the recreational side of that, while that does certainly include things like hiking trails, bridle trails, just scenic opportunities, picnicking areas, those types of recreational opportunities. The one thing that is a huge draw to our state forests that a lot of people may not be aware of is the opportunity for recreational hunting. The reason that is so popular on our lands is because since we are such a large landholding agency, we're able to offer a lot of opportunities that hunters can't get on their own. So, certain landowners might own, 30, 40, maybe a couple hundred acres, but us within the state forest system have larger contiguous blocks of forests that hunters can utilize. At our largest state forest, Shawnee State Forest outside of Portsmouth, there's about 60,000 contiguous acres of land that's available for hunting. All of the hunting on state forests is free of charge. And it's a huge draw, not only for local visitors or local Ohioans that live in and around our forests, but it's a draw for folks, from around the states and other states around the country. Whenever we do our hunter surveys in the fall, it's not uncommon to see a lot of vehicles from the New England area, other places throughout the Midwest, and occasionally we'll even get folks from even farther out than that, Montana and the Dakotas and those sorts of areas. For the hunting that we have within Ohio, the primary game species are white-tailed deer and wild turkey. That is what most of the draw is and what most people are interested in. But we also do have a large number of folks that hunt squirrel, woodcock, and ruffed grouse. And within the state, there are also other species available for hunting, but those are the primary ones that people are interested in within our state forest. And for our local managers that work at that forest level, the people that are actually on the ground, a lot of times at the offices fielding the phone calls and the people that walk in, we found over the years that they get a lot of the same questions over and over from hunters. So, a hunter will come in and want to know, where are the recent harvests at? Where can I camp while I'm here if they're from out of town and don't want to pay for a hotel or that sort of thing. And so, the thing that a lot of hunters themselves have even asked, is, do you have a map for this sort of thing? And the answer up until now has always been, as great as that would be, we don't actually have anything to give you to help you with this outside of having those types of conversations. And so this has been a project that has kind of been on the back burner, or at least talked about for a while. We had plans to start doing this in early 2020, and everyone kind of knows what happened with that. And so my involvement here in PMA now was kind of an opportunity to resurface this project and get it moving forward again. So looking at kind of where this came from, we do have a prototype of sorts. And so these are what we call the grouse map. These were a product of a grant we received in 2012 from the Ruffed Grouse Society. And this map was very good to a limited extent because, it does show some of those things that hunters are interested in. It was, fairly easy to produce up front. Like I said, it shows some of those things, and the hunters that have used it, whenever they see it, kind of get excited because it's what they're looking for to help them. The issues with this map, though, are that the grant that produced it, was kind of focused on one forest. And so, that doesn't really help anyone outside of that forest. And on top of that, there was no real digital format produced for this. This was a map that was just printed on paper, available for people to have, or, a PDF format that could be emailed to folks, except the scale of it was meant for an 11 by 17 kind of tabloid, large shaped paper. That's something a lot of people don't have sitting around their house. And even then, since this was for that Shawnee forest that I mentioned, our largest forest, even on the paper, it's kind of hard to tell some of the details and that sort of thing, just because it's hard to compress that onto that side of a sheet. And then, as this was created in 2012, we're continually doing more management. Trails might come and go or change throughout the years and those sorts of things. So the map, would quickly become outdated. And then we'd have hunters, that saw something new that wasn't on the map yet, and then would start asking those types of questions. So we went back in 2017 and updated the map. But again, the same things will happen, that it gets quickly outdated. So now here we are again, 5 years after that, being able to hopefully come up with a more permanent and easier system to keep relevant. So as part of this, was able to do a SWOT analysis and kind of look at some of the aspects of this that are important. So obviously, from the strength side of thing, we have our existing grouse maps that were in place. And then within our division, our geographic information systems that you'll hear me reference a lot, GIS, we do have a lot of data. And going into this project, a lot of the data that we needed existed. It was just a matter of getting it into the right places and formats and that sort of thing. And as I've said, there's a strong demand from the hunting community for this. And so this, we feel within the vision is a very worthwhile project that will be able to have a lot of benefits. From the weaknesses, even though we do have a lot of data, the past management of that has not always been consistent. So, we have certain data sets that are very well kept up. We have other data sets that are in various levels of completion. Certain managers are, more aware and in tune and capable of keeping those updated. And so, one of the things that you'll hear me talk about a lot and is really at the crux of this is that even though the outcome of this project is a map product to be used, the real meat of this is a data management project. It's fairly easy to create the maps. It's not so easy to get all the data in place and put together to be able to make those maps. One of the other kind of things is that, we really don't have a dedicated staff person that deals with maps and that sort of thing. So, minimal resources available. Everyone, always has other things that they're working on. So to add another project onto folks' plate, myself included, is, a definite consideration. But like I said, the opportunities that this present are to have that improved service to our customers. As much as we like to interact with the public and like talking to the hunters and that sort of thing, it really comes down to, at the end of the day, we weren't really able to answer their questions in the best way possible, and really give them the thing that they needed and were really asking for. So through doing this, we're hoping also to get, or keep support from that group of recreationists. We do get a lot of support from the hunting community for a lot of the activities we do. And so we want to make sure that we recognize that and help keep them active in our programs. And then as far as threats, kind of what I alluded to before, just needing to make sure that we have that data in place and finding the time to put everything together. So to get this started, I set up a meeting with our project sponsors. So two of our assistant chiefs, one of which is more, involved in my side of it with the land management side. The other one more involved with the operations side. And then we also pulled in our information and education manager, because ultimately he's the person, that's going to be involved kind of down the line in the publication and advertising side of this. And he also has experience with map making, and wanted to make sure that any products that we created were in line with other map products that we're doing. So making sure that symbology is kind of consistent and that sort of thing. And so during that meeting, we ended up kind of agreeing on the presentation of the data. So what would be displayed on the map, what didn't we need on the map. And fortunately, one of those sponsors, one of our assistant chiefs, is also an avid hunter. So he really is in tune with that community as one of those folks himself. And so he was able to give a lot of input and really drill down into what people would and wouldn't want for this sort of product. And so finally from there, we were able to come up with some specific goals and try and make a timeline on what would be reasonable to complete this project. So those goals specifically then were to create that hunting map for each of the 24 forests. And that's really the product that people will see at the time this is all done. And so we wanted that to display those sorts of things, timber harvest, road trails, facilities, just things that hunters will be interested in. And then the other kind of neat part of the project is that the final maps will be what's called a GPS enabled PDF. And so a lot of people don't realize that it's possible to create PDFs that have embedded geographic information in those. And so there are a couple apps out on the market now that you can load those PDF maps into, and it will actually put you on that map. And so for a hunter that's out in the woods looking for these things, before it was kind of take your paper map and drive down the road and hope that you're kind of in the right place. Now with this GPS functionality, you'll know exactly where you're at on that map and not have to worry about being lost or wondering if you're in the right place or not. And so then for goal number 2, what I alluded to is, to be able to make those maps, we really need to make sure that the data we have are accurate and complete. If this is a product that we're going to be putting out to the public, we really need to make sure that the information that they're getting is correct and that we have a good product that we're providing to them. And then finally, to be able to get this product out to the public, we'll be creating a website that's hosted by the Division of Forestry and putting that out there. So our timeline here, that initial planning meeting happened on March 1st, where we came up with the goals. And then these next 3, kind of the draft map creation, feedback, and the final map production are, sort of the 3 steps in making the maps themselves. And I'll get more into detail on those, but right now we're at that final map production stage and working on getting those finalized, and then hopeful that in August or maybe early September, we'll be able to actually get the maps posted onto the website, and which is timely because, in that late summer, fall period is when a lot of these hunters actually start to want to scout their spots for later in the year. So to talk some about the data management that goes into this, on the right in those pictures, you can kind of see what these final map products will look like and the program to create them. So everything's housed in a geographic information system databases. This is a common industry thing. So ArcMap is the name of the program, and it's widely used in about any industry that is involved in any sort of map making or geographic information like this. And then, like I said before, we had within these databases various levels of accuracy. So for example, our harvesting layer of where timber harvests have happened is very accurate overall because those things have been GPSed over the years. And it's one of the things that we're responsible for tracking and reporting on regularly. So, that part of it didn't need much work, but we have other things like trail updates that have happened or trail reroutes that hadn't been consistently input into the databases. And then we also even had some things that we identified as part of this that we didn't actually have geographic data for that we would need to add in. And so we had our existing data sets. And so these are things, like I mentioned, our forest boundaries, harvests, trails, parking areas, those sorts of things that have been collected over the year. And we had a pretty good handle on what those things were and where they were at. But we also decided for this project, we needed to come up with some more type of what we called hunter parking areas, some places that are convenient for hunters to pull off the road, that sort of thing. Hunters typically, for obvious reasons, are not don't like to congregate with each other within the woods. Everyone likes to have their own specific little area staked out for safety reasons and success reasons. And so our goal was to identify some specific pull-off spots along the road, that sort of thing, to help spread people out. We also, around our buildings, facilities, campgrounds, that sort of thing, have no hunting zones. And so we wanted to actually map those and include those in this map product for obvious reasons. And then just coming up with any of the missing features and correcting anything, errors, omissions, that sort of thing that would need to go into this. And so then for the actual production side of it, the first step that I did was to create kind of prototype maps, similar to those grouse maps, but just a little prettier and more updated. And then sending those out to the local managers for them to be able to review, because they're really the ones that know on the ground whether those maps and data points are correct or not. And then from there, as errors and omissions were identified, they could go out, collect the correct data, send that back in, and we could get that incorporated into the databases as needed. And then using that to make the final maps. So kind of cleaning up the template to make a more professional product for the public to have, doing another round of quality control of the data to make sure that it was correct and that nothing got overlooked. And then finally sending that back out to the managers to review again. And then the final step of this will be publishing the maps on the website. And we also want to make sure that that information gets out to our partners that are involved in hunting. So, I mentioned the Rough Grouse Society that provided funding for the first round of those grouse maps. But we also have a close connection with the National Wild Turkey Federation, which promote wild turkey hunting, and some more of those groups out there that, they can really make sure that this product gets into the hands of people that'll be able to benefit from it. And so our current status and next steps here are that of the 24 state forests, 15 of those maps we've been able to get completed. They've had all the reviews done on them that they need. And so within the next month, we're hoping to get the final ones done. A lot of those are smaller forests that don't have a lot of need for review, just more so making sure that the stuff that is there is correct. The final template for the maps has been created. So, once those remaining maps get reviewed, it's a fairly quick process to spit those out. And just from the logistics side of getting those onto the website, it'll be helpful to do it as a batch. And so we're kind of waiting to get all those together before we go through and put those on. And then, this is just kind of an iterative process going forward. So as hunters use this, we're hoping to be able to incorporate some sort of feedback system for them, whether that's on the website, putting an email address that they can send in questions, comments, errors that they find in the field, that sort of thing, or creating an actual survey to get ongoing feedback, whatever it might be. But like I said, we have 200,000 acres, lots of trails, lots of roads, a lot of stuff that goes into this. And so as much as someone might have spent the time looking at it, there's still going to be some errors here and there that, we probably won't find until someone is able to actually go out in the field and find it on their own. And then lastly, to avoid, some of the issues that we came up with before of stuff being outdated, the actual map templates are going to be put in a format that, we'll have a few people within the division who are capable of kind of pulling that open. And once the data get updated, or as long as those data stay updated, making new maps and getting those posted onto the website should be something we can do pretty quickly. So we're probably looking at an update schedule, if not every year, every 2 or 3 years at most, to make sure that we have update and relevant information on these maps. And so with that, I'll be glad to take questions.
Thanks, Jared. I love this. Anything that uses technology, innovation, efficiency, and also customer services is right up my alley. I am not a hunter, but I would imagine that if for those of you folks that are, this would be a really nice tool to put into their toolbox. So in the sense of trying to track time here, I'm going to go right to Alexandra to handle the questions and comments.
All right, great. Thanks, Rob. So it looks like we have a couple comments and questions. So Donna asks, are there ideas on how to improve and standardize data collection? And is there a potential for putting it into everyone's calendar or similar?
Yeah, and that's something we've talked about as well, and sort of where we found ourselves in this state of, there wasn't any real protocol on how to do this. So that's something we're hoping to do as well, is to kind of standardize protocols and actually, assign people to keep this stuff updated, or at least, do some quality control on a regular basis, and make sure that we don't find ourselves in this position again of having outdated stuff that takes a long time to fix.
Great, thank you. So we have 2 more comments. Mary says, great graphics, clear and logical. Eric says, what a neat concept and a really interesting way to address the situation and improve upon what you're trying to do. Pretty neat how you track all the information and can use it to make the maps you have created. Good to see a state agency really understanding their target demographic and looking to do something to make it better. So Tiffany just said, my family will use these. Thank you. All right. Last call for any questions or comments. All right. Oh, here's one more. Okay. So Matthew says, will your map be dynamic for future changes? Data source change on new opportunities for hunters? Yeah,
I think, as we go through the updating process, that's going to be something that we look at too. And it's something we definitely want to collect feedback on. And so, I think as updates happen, we'll definitely discuss, is there a better way to present this? Do we have new or better information in the future than what we have now? And how do we make sure that keeps getting incorporated?
All right, so it looks like those are all the questions and comments that we have for today. So I will turn it back over to Rob.
Again, thanks, Jared. I really love your project and look forward to seeing the finished product. We have two more projects for the first day, and that is going to be Miss Terry Ernest, and then our last one will be with Sean Lentini and Tiffany the Chant Hunt. So Terry is gonna, I love her title of her project because I think she wrote it specifically for me because she knew I'd get all excited. But she's talking about updating outdated computer systems and modernizing to create more user-friendly systems. So I think you wrote that title specifically to get me all excited. So thank you anyway, Terry, but I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to hearing what this is all about. So take it away.
All righty. Good morning, everyone. My name is Terry Ernest. I am a program administrator with the State of Ohio Office of Child Support. My project is one that many business environments, both public and private, either have experienced or will soon experience, and that's the need to update their business's computer system to a more user-friendly business tool. The Office of Child Support, whose mission it is to provide leadership, structure, and resources to advance the child support program, has recently embarked on a project to modernize the current child support tracking system used by workers in all 88 counties. In keeping with the agency's mission, the goal of the project is to redesign the system into a case management tool with a focus on user-centered design that's simplified, intuitive, and easy to navigate. The full modernization project is a multifaceted project with many moving parts. The piece I want to talk about today is the task assigned to my team, which is critical to the success of the larger product, and that is identifying and documenting the needs of the business and system users. At first, it may seem as though an upgrade is a simple task, similar to unplugging one computer only to replace it with another. However, when the existing system contains nearly 25 years worth of data, intertwined within a series of screens designed to meet both state and federal regulations, how can all of this data be reorganized, picked up, and moved to a new modernized system designed around the needs of the user? This project will take us through the behind-the-scenes process that many never even think about. This is the process of identifying and capturing the business needs for the design and documenting them in the form of a written business requirements document, which will be shared with system developers to guide the new design. For those of you who are not familiar with business requirements and what their importance is, let's take a quick look. What are business requirements? Business requirements are a detailed description of the features a business needs from the system or software being created or modified. They define at a high level the needs of the organization, answering the most common question of what exactly the organization wants or needs. They state the measurable benefits that will be achieved when the requirements are met. Simply put, business requirements define the reason behind a project as well as the objectives needed to fulfill the reason. There's an intent behind every project, and the business requirements must provide the objectives necessary for the project to be defined as successful. At the end of my project, we will have a single document describing the appearance and functionality of every web page in the child support system. We will document what existing screens and fields will be consolidated, which will be enhanced, and most importantly, how child support workers will be driven through the steps necessary to effectively manage their cases. The current child support system is made up of 299 separate screens. Each of those screens is made up of at least 10, but up to 80 enterable data fields per screen. Child support cases run through a life cycle that include paternity establishment, support establishment, and enforcement of the order through order termination and case closure that can typically last 18 years or longer. The current system allows this life cycle to be tracked, but it doesn't intuitively guide the worker to the next step in the process. Workers must go through extensive training to understand all pieces of the process and the steps they need to take next. In addition, many steps in the process require a pause. For instance, service of process is often needed when case participants are notified of actions on their case. The pause to allow for service often must be tracked manually by the user, forcing reliance on external calendars and reminders. On top of all of this, navigating through the system can also require external tools. All of the 299 screens are named with an acronym. Not only do workers need to learn the 299 screen names to navigate to the screen, but the name oftentimes doesn't make sense. Over time, workers learn the screen names such as BHAS, CIP1, ENLD, and on and on and on. However, there will always be a time where identifying the name of the screen needed for the next action will have to be looked up, which once again is forcing reliance on outside resources. One piece of the overall modernization project has already wrapped up. We were fortunate enough to have a vendor provide recommendations for improved design standards, which will make the system more user-friendly. Part of what my team needs to do is incorporate these design standards into every screen in the system while still maintaining the functionality necessary to manage child support caseloads in accordance with state and federal regulations. In addition to the usability issue, there also has to be consideration to requests for enhancements to the system. Over the years, thousands of enhancements and fixes have gone into the system. However, there are still 495 enhancement requests that have not been implemented due to resource constraints. Could any of these enhancement requests also resolve some usability issue? If so, we would absolutely want to include those as part of this project. So now that we have an understanding of our current issues, we have every objective we want to cover in our business requirements. We will need to focus on the finite steps necessary to incorporate the recommendations to correct content and usability barriers for our system users. In addition, we will do what we can to incorporate previously requested enhancements that may resolve usability issues. The team will work to identify what needs to occur to simplify navigation for users, and lastly, to consolidate the existing 299 screens to a more manageable volume without losing any existing data. All of this while ensuring all state and federally mandated actions continue to occur. But where do we start? Obviously, this is a very overwhelming list of tasks. To heighten the anxiety even more, we are now responsible for the well-being of over 950,000 existing child support cases tracked in the system by child support workers from each of Ohio's 88 counties. Yes, we've identified our objectives for the project and understand what must be included in our requirements, but how can we possibly organize all of the details necessary to create one comprehensive document that will ultimately be used in the creation of the new user-centered design system? We had to find some tools to enable us to break the task down into manageable work packages. The first step was to create a logic model. Logic models are useful tools for program planning and evaluation because they guide staff in thinking about evaluating their program. They identify assumptions and potential challenges. They assist in identifying intended programmatic outcomes, and they organize, connect, and identify gaps in evaluation efforts. So we first needed to identify the resources that would be needed for our project. First was access to any and all research materials to understand every aspect of how the system is working now, to be sure we aren't inadvertently removing necessary functionality. This requires multiple steps, including completing research on the office's interweb, detailing existing functionality from the user perspective, researching previous system release documentation to help us understand the behind-the-scenes system functionality, and of course, relying on the expertise of office subject matter experts, as well as technical staff. The next resource is meeting time. There are a lot of moving parts with this project. Therefore, carving out time to meet would be extremely critical. A planning and tracking mechanism would also be needed to ensure we know what still needs to be addressed, while also making sure we haven't missed anything. Lastly, we need stakeholder input as we move along. This will not be our system alone. It has to meet the needs of all state and county child support workers. So periodic check-ins for their input is vital. Next is the activities that will be necessary in our process. Requirements gathering meetings. The team scheduled sessions to accommodate brainstorming, potential designs, and business requirements in 2 to 2.5 hour increments, 4 days per week. This is in addition to each of the 7 team members conducting their own independent work. Next, we need to schedule subject matter expert review sessions. As designs and business requirements are identified, meetings are scheduled with internal subject matter experts to look for gaps. Lastly, once design and requirements are ready, they are reviewed with senior management for final approval. With the designated resources and activities, the outputs we desire should become apparent, including the final business requirements document containing the requirements necessary to update the system content to meet the established standards of readability and web content, to streamline navigation by reducing screen volume and guiding users with clear and concise next steps, and implementing enhancements that improve the usability of the system. The measurable outcomes we hope to achieve include a 75% reduction in the volume of screens, improved case management by workers due to new system-determined decision-making, and increased worker productivity by at least 25% due to less time necessary to complete actions. These outcomes not only assist the county workers by allowing for a more effective case management system and reduced training times, but will also result in an improvement to the customer service provided to child support case participants by ensuring all actions are taken in a timely manner. The next tool we utilized is the work breakdown structure. A work breakdown structure is a visual project breakdown and is honestly one of my favorite tools. Believe it or not, everything you do can be broken down into a work breakdown structure. Take something as simple as baking a cake. If you start with the outcome as the very beginning piece, so the outcome would be bake a cake, then you detail the components necessary to bake the cake. You have to have ingredients, you have to have tools, then detail the work packages that must be completed, such as creating an ingredient list and a list of the tools necessary. Finally, detailing the activities that need to be taken to complete that work. So to make sure I have everything on my ingredient list, I need to go to the store. To have the oven ready, I need to preheat the oven. Detailing all steps in this manner help to ensure that all the I's have been dotted and all the T's have been crossed. Same goes for our project. Our final outcome is going to be the business requirements document. The deliverables making up the document are the 4 objectives we've identified: recommendations to correct content and usability barriers, addressing enhancement requests, simplified navigation, and screen consolidation. To genuinely understand the objectives, we need to identify specific work packages. We would need a gap analysis document to help us identify where the current system is failing users, allowing us to identify improved processes. In addition, we would need to conduct research and analyze the 495 previous enhancement requests to determine which ones are deemed in scope for the project. Lastly, we need to define the activities that will need to be completed to complete the work packages. To be certain we have covered every existing screen and every existing field, we would need to map existing screens and screen fields to new screens. Creating page mockups will provide visual verification of the functionality, allowing the team as well as stakeholders to review the new design in advance for their buy-in. As I previously mentioned, daily brainstorming meetings are a must. 8 to 10 hours a week are being spent brainstorming and reviewing every piece of existing functionality. Finally, reviews of all proposed changes by the subject matter experts allow for the team to make necessary corrections when needed. And then lastly, for senior management approval. So where are we now? Approximately 5 months into the project, the team has made considerable progress. By following our work breakdown, we started by focusing on the system enhancement requests. Each of the 495 requests were reviewed and appropriately categorized into one of 3 categories. We either determined they were in scope for this project, meaning they were going to address usability issues, or they were an issue that would auto-correct itself with the new system changes. And then the third was that they could possibly be deemed out of scope because they weren't really related to this project. They were more of a behind-the-scenes system fix rather than a usability issue. At the end of the review, 75 enhancement requests were deemed in scope. An additional 42 are expected to be automatically corrected based on the new design. This leaves 378 enhancements requests, which still seems like a large number. However, this will allow us to continue a process for continuous improvement of the new system as we move forward. The team conducted research on the 75 in-scope enhancements to identify the business requirements necessary to implement the changes. The business requirements were reviewed by subject matter experts, updated based on their feedback, and then finally approved by management. Next, we moved on to implementing the vendor design recommendations across the screens while focusing on improved navigation and screen consolidation. After conducting a gap analysis, we were able to identify pain points where the user was forced to either know or research the next steps. We address these pain points by intuitively guiding them to the next steps, either by consolidating specific screens or creating user tasks for themselves or another worker. Data mapping was completed to ensure all screens and data fields were included, and I am thrilled to report we were able to map all data from the existing 299 screens down to just 33 new screens, which is a reduction of 89%, surpassing our goal of 75%. The remainder of the work is still ongoing. Screen mockups are being created and shared with subject matter experts for feedback. So far, we've completed screen mockups and subject matter expert walkthroughs on 24% of the new screens. Written business requirements are underway on these new screens as well. Once the screen mockups and draft business requirements are complete, they will go to senior management for approval and then shared with our county partners for their feedback. We've come so far, but we have so far yet to travel. The road is full of twists and turns, but the number one thing I've learned from this project is that the ability to shift and pivot is critical in an environment of change. One of the many shifts will occur next month in August. As I mentioned, the overall system modernization is a multifaceted project. In August, this current phase of the project will have to be temporarily stopped until early 2023, while my team pivots our focus to another piece of the overall modernization project. We are needed for testing what we refer to as the lift and shift. This is a move from a mainframe operating system to a SQL Server system. This upgrade is the framework that will kick off the ability for the changes the team has identified to occur, as it will result in a web-based system. However, as soon as the operating system changes are complete, we'll once again pivot back to where we left off, completing our business requirements, which, once complete and approved, will be provided to the state system developers who will create the new design based on our hard work. We are all very much looking forward to that chapter of this journey. We're expecting the development of the new design to hopefully begin later in 2023. And with that, I want to thank you all for taking the time to follow us on our journey through documenting all the pieces of the puzzle that need to fall into place in order to tackle the move from an outdated system to a new comprehensive user-friendly system. I would like to take this time to hear what feedback or questions you have for me.
Hey, Terry, this is awesome. First of all, the first thing I thought of when you had like whatever thousands, 950,000 cases and all these different processes, I kind of thought that the analogy that popped in my head or the vision was trying to drink instead of from a fountain, but from a fire hose. So I don't understand. Like I gave you credit for trying to manage that process, and so it sounds like you've got it under like the method to the madness kind of say to kind of get it under control. So my question is more from a cultural perspective and team building as practice. Like was there like a process to get people on board, but then get them activated and engaged? Like, can you just kind of go through like that kind of process as far as the people part of this aspect of things, of how it all went from that perspective?
There has honestly been a lot of processes to get people on board. This has been something our office has been working on for years. So we've slowly been building it up. And the number one thing that we're going to continue to do is to share this information with our biggest stakeholders, the county users, the ones who use the system the most. We will have ongoing sessions with them in which we share our design recommendations and get their feedback. We want to make sure that we're not missing anything that they may need. So we want their input, and we may be tweaking things up until the very last minute based on their input. We're also talking about, we do have an interweb page that is put out there by the Office of Child Support that's for all state and county child support workers. We will have a map of where we're going in this process, and eventually put some of these screen mock-ups that we're putting together out there as well. So it's just a slow buy-in. We want to make sure that everyone's familiar with it. Obviously, if we just all of a sudden flip the switch one day and everything's different, that's going to be a huge uproar. So we're just taking it slow and easy and just bringing them in as we go.
Well, I think it's fascinating to me. My brain doesn't work that way. So when you started going through that process, I just was overwhelmed and wanted to shut down. But then when you went through as far as using the tools and the methodology, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes
yeah, sense. It does really help to break it down. I agree.
Exactly. Awesome. All right, Alexandra, I'm going to pass over to you.
Great, thank you. So Terry, I'm going to start with a few comments and then we'll get to the questions. So Chrissy states this is going to be very valuable to those in the child support system and would provide much needed improvements. Thank you for this. Brian states, great presentation. I've been a part of a few major system changes and that entire process is a lot of work. All right, so we do have some questions, and if you're out there in the audience and you have a question for Terry, please chat your question. All right, so Matthew asks, for mock-ups, have you considered wireframe or storyboard?
Right now, believe it or not, Matthew, because my team is not on the technical side, we are just doing things right now in mock-up as far as Word and PowerPoint. Once we get a vendor involved to help us further along with this, they may be able to help us out with doing wireframes and that kind of thing.
All right, Eric states and asks, what a great project and something so big to tackle for this effort. Always great to try to modernize an older system. Maybe I missed it, but how are you handling the organizational change management that comes with something like this?
As I mentioned, this is a very large, multifaceted project. So we do have a lot of pieces. We do also have a vendor working with us on a lot of these changes. So at this point, for what my team is doing, which is just identifying the business requirements, there's not necessarily a change management component. There's a change management component, obviously, with the larger project. The change that we have in place for us is, like I mentioned, as we share this information with our stakeholders. If they have some pushback or would like to maybe see something changed or whatever, due to the fact that we're still in the business requirements phase, which is the earliest phase of the project, it's very easy for us to make those changes and move forward.
All right, so as of right now, we have one more comment. So last call for questions. Mary states, fantastic presentation and slides. Took a big subject and made it clear. Logic model was great for this.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to take a quick pause to see if we have any more questions or comments that come through. All right, I'll pass it back over to Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alexandra. Terry, one more comment. I don't know if you may have already done this already, but have you partnered with the Lean Ohio office and tapped into those folks as far as process mapping and the different tools that they have?
Not for any of this, because we already have a lot of processes in place from different projects over the years, but we do utilize the Ohio Lean quite a bit for a lot of other things. So, but that's definitely a good point and something we could certainly check out.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. Every time I can find a way to make connections across the different partners we have, I wanted to do that. So, I mean, it already sounds like you already do process mapping and things like that already, but they have like a lot of those, like the A3 tools or the current state, things like that. So anyway, I'm just going to zip it. But anyway, fantastic job. And we appreciate it. Good luck. Keep us posted.
Well, it looks like we have one more question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. So this one just came in. So Peter asks, where do you find the motivation to keep going on such a complex long-term project?
First of all, I guess the biggest thing is I have a team of not only senior management, but also my team of 7 who are incredible, and everyone's very passionate. So we all kind of feed off of one another to just keep moving forward. Secondly, for myself personally, I meditate a lot. That helps.
I saw the namaste sign behind you right there. I was just like, oh yeah, that's probably.
Yep, that keeps me going.
It's a great suggestion. All right, Alexandra, any other questions or comments or feedback?
It looks like we are all set. If you have any comments, obviously for Terry, you can just put those into the evaluation and we'll make sure that those comments get to Terry.
Thank you all very much.
Great job, Terry. All right, well, I think we're going to be a few minutes ahead, but I think we should just power through, if that's okay with Tiffany and Sean, and wrap up a few minutes earlier. So I'm going to pass the baton over, introduce them real quick and pass the baton. But last but not least, we are here to joined by Tiffany DeShant Hunt and Sean Lentini from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And I'm actually on vacation right now, but I'm not complaining. I love being here. But what I'm saying is I'm currently in the state of Michigan, and we are traversing the state and going through all these different state parks and kind of enjoying what they have up here in the state of Michigan. But this project is talking about the Cedar Creek Pioneer Village and creating a strategic plan for them and continuing to hit the state parks mission. So I guess the reason why I bring up vacation is that I'm interested to hear about how you all can continue to advance and provide this wonderful service to the folks in the state of Ohio. And for folks like me and my family that are kind of bebopping around the state of Ohio, what maybe a different place to check out as we look for vacations going into next year. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Sean and Tiffany. Take it away.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you, Rob. I just got back from camping in Michigan as well. It was a lot cooler up there. It was a good time and disconnected from this class and work, which was nice, and glad you're having a nice time up there. So, but Tiffany and I did a project looking at the Cedars Creek Pioneer Village. We have a working title right now of Sustainability and Contingency. It's gone through a couple different changes, but I'm sure this clicks through. Okay. And so I'll introduce myself. My name is Sean Lantini. I am an investigator with the Ohio State Parks, Division of Parks and Watercraft. So I cover major crime and death inside of our state parks and then on our waterways. So it's pretty challenging. It's pretty wild. If you see me around, it's probably not a good thing. Usually something bad has happened. But I started in 2013. I actually started down where Tiffany works, Cedar Creek area and the Cowan Lake region. Was a patrol officer, park ranger for a number of years. And then I've been an investigator for 2 years.
My name is Tiffany DeShant Hunt, and I am, as Sean said, the current park manager at Cedar Creek State Park. I started with the Division of Natural Resources, Department of Parks and Watercraft in 2014. And I am fairly new to Cedar Creek area. I came here just this past November.
Excellent. So again, our project title is the Cedar Creek's Pioneer Village to Sustainability and Contingency, and we prepared it for this cohort number 8, which has been a lot of fun, and learned a lot through this process and how to do project management here. But this is a report version 1, and it's being issued today. So the contents of our project and the presentation today that we'll provide you, we'll go ahead and introduce the project. We'll identify the problems and provide you with the solutions that we've come up with. We'll show you the process through the logic model. And then we'll identify the objectives that we're able to identify from looking at that logic model and breaking it down. We'll show you one key challenge and one key opportunity for that. And then we will allow for any questions at the end as well. So the introduction. This project outlines the steps to evaluate the Cedar Creek's Pioneer Village as a continued asset to Ohio State Parks. And it's based on the strategic plan for the division overall, where they identified that all of our facilities have to be clean, safe, and welcoming to our visitors. So this just takes that and narrows it down to one specific area of our state parks at Cedar Creek State Park in Warren County.
So Cedar Creek State Park is one of the 70, well, will be 76. We just broke ground on our 76th park in the Ohio State Park system. Inside of Cedar Creek is the Pioneer Village. So that is one part of our park. The Pioneer Village came to be through when the acquisition of the area happened. Our park and our lake is a flood control lake. And so when the acquisition happened of the land and they were creating our park, they found a log cabin and moved it to the current Pioneer Village Road area. The division then put out an inquiry asking if there was any group or any interested folks who would want to administer the area, and the Pioneer Village Association was born from that. They stepped up to the plate. Over the years, they added buildings. So currently there are 25 buildings in the Pioneer Village area, and they range from a good variety of what you would find, you know, back in the day in a true Pioneer Village. So they have a sugar shack, they have a school, there's a meeting house. We have a few residences there. There's a blacksmith shop. And as you walk the area, there is history associated with each one of the buildings. So the Pioneer Village administers the area now through a lease with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. So Cedar Creek State Park is leased to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and then we lease the Pioneer Village area to the Pioneer Village Association.
So the association is responsible for all the maintenance of the area. A lease was signed most recently in June of 2012, but it has been in effect with the same group since 1973. So there's a long history there. Why we're looking at this project now and why it's important is because this current lease expires on June 30th, 2025. So here's just a graphic of the lease. And Tiffany likes this lease because it is it's a strong lease, as she would describe it. It really lays out the roles that the current partners should play. But as we'll identify here, the problem with the lease is that it might not be exactly where we want it to be. So the area in general just needs brought back to DNR standard of being clean, safe, and welcoming. So we have this opportunity to strengthen our lease here. And the largest problem with that is that there's an approximate budget shortfall of $250,000 to cover the required repairs and maintenance. As we said, the association is required to cover all of the maintenance costs.
One of the other struggles or reasons maybe that we're to this point that the area needs support, and that's beyond COVID, where a lot of organizations lost volunteers and volunteerism drastically changed what volunteerism looks like. And the Pioneer Village Association is 100% volunteer hours and hands. So over here at Cedar Creek State Park, there have been about 6 managers in the past 10 years. And so that hurts the consistency in working with partners and in guiding some of these things and holding the expectations of what our areas that are leased out really should look like and need to represent the state well and what our expectations are. So in talking about our project, we came up with really the correlation of one of our strong values. The core values of DNR is if it's worth doing now. And we thought, well, why wait? This is something, you know, we're at the tail end of COVID. People are ramping up now. So this is really the time to step in and create this sustainability plan for the area.
So if it's worth doing now with our solution to save, rehabilitate, transition, and sustain the Cedar Creek Pioneer Village area. So in order to do that, just overall, generally, we need to invest the time and resources needed to get the Cedar Creek Pioneer Village back up to the standards of DNR. And we want to do that by empowering our current leaseholders or assisting in a restructuring of the lease. So the process of this project and how we were going to accomplish that solution, we took a logic model, which is where we are and where we want to be. We identified objectives from that logic model. We did a SWOT analysis for each objective, and then we made action items and came up with timeframes for each of those objectives as well. So I put together a logic model here. So generally we have, we want to be safe, clean, and welcoming for this area, and we have our needs and our assets identified. So we also have to make sure that we keep this within the priorities of DNR in general. One of the highest priorities is the safety concerns. You got to keep in mind these buildings are over 200 years old. The building codes were different back then, but we still have to maintain the safety aspect of that. We've got to keep it within DNR's mission and vision, values. We have a lot of resources, and then we have very high standards. So basically we have our inputs, our outputs, and our outcomes. So if we input the staff time, volunteer hours, planning time, money, experts, materials, equipment, space, and partners, we can come up with some cool outputs through this project and able to identify our current partners with the Cedar Creek Pioneer Village Incorporated, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and DNR. That's who's been administering the area since 1973. Through Tiffany's work, we've identified new participants, the Ohio Historical Society, the Great Parks of Hamilton County, the Warren County Historical Society, and obviously the public's always a participant in anything we do at our state parks. So we've been developing plans. We're starting to partner with new groups, as well as maintaining and strengthening our partnership with the existing groups. We're counseling and advising the existing group. There's been a lot of changes, mostly because of COVID, and then just the age of the group in general. Tiffany's been conducting a lot of meetings, and she has been doing a couple different audits. So from that, we have different products. So we came up with plans, our audits. Most importantly, we want to have fun. We're going to have the similar events and more events taking place at the area. And then again, remember, it's safe, clean, and welcoming. So our outcomes are really what we're looking for here. And in the short term, we want to maintain the interest of it. So as we said before, there have been 6 different managers. Some of them have tried to tackle this problem, but the interest can die off given how busy we are in other parts. And that ties in directly to the motivation to improve this area. So if we can prioritize the improvements, it can, obviously the plan can start to come together. We want to harness that momentum, and we want to work smoothly in a forward direction. Intermediate, we have some SMART objectives around here. We want to increase the volunteer hours by a certain percentage, which will be in our paper. Want to come up with more plans for the village, want to adopt working days, and also have an adopted building program, which we think will be very helpful in maintaining the maintenance of these things. Our workshops, we want to increase the event space, get it more out there in the public, that the spaces are available, increase our field trips, and make sure that our partnerships are enhanced. Long term, we definitely need to come up with more funding sources. And community engagement is a huge part of what we do in the parks. And long term, we would like this area to be really involved with that. Have more events, continued improvement and maintenance, and then we want to increase the intrinsic value of the area.
So through our logic model and the SWOT, other tools that we used, that we learned in our coursework, we came up with the project objectives to really guide us towards our mapping. And the first one was determine the viability of the area. The second is assist in stakeholder identification and engagement. The third was to, face that lease that's coming up in 2025 and develop a new lease. And then, of course, highlight the asset to Cedar Creek Park and its value to the state park system.
So objective 1 was determine the viability of the area. So we have a key opportunity here. I mentioned the events. So pre-COVID in 2019, the Cedar Creek Pioneer Village hosted 13 events, and it did generate some revenue, around $20,000. We think this is a great opportunity and makes this area very viable. I think we can increase the number of events and increase the revenue there and make this place more self-sustaining. Mm-hmm. But there is a key challenge with the viability of the area, is that maintenance backlog. Can we actually get this place up to the standards that we need, given that there is a $250,000 budget shortfall to complete those necessary repairs?
Yeah, and so going through that objective, we came up with some action steps to really guide us. And we established the management engineering team. We conducted a basic audit of the buildings, developed a community master facility plan, and that is what we're going to be doing as we move forward, and then implement that master plan. And then, of course, one of the sustainability pieces that's super important is that we don't forget to track and measure our success, but keep that as an ongoing piece. One of the things that we did in auditing the buildings was create a rating system. There's 25 buildings, there's a lot going on in the area, how to sort it all and put it all together. So we came up with a priority system, and then 1 through 5. So P1 is a life safety issue, P2 is a fix it or lose it, 3 was, soon. And then 4 was something we can defer until later. And 5 was, I call fluffing it up around the parks. We just really need to improve the looks, but it's pretty structurally sound.
So objective 2 here was the assist in stakeholder identification and engagement. How can we obtain new partners to strengthen our lease moving forward. So we have a key opportunity here of the historical value of the area. It's cool. It's really neat. Buildings are over 200 years old. They thought it was important back then, and we think it's very important now. So there's over 20 relocated and restored buildings. It does provide a link to the past, and people like history. So there's a key opportunity there to identify these people. The key challenge, though, is the logistics. What would the restructuring look like? We're working through that now, but it is definitely a challenge there to figure out how the partnerships will work.
So again, our action steps that came from those objectives and from the models that we took and applied were to audit the current organization, really reach out and identify stakeholders broadly, conduct stakeholder meetings and get to know folks, introductions, some planning, and then we're going to plan for further stakeholder involvement in the future as we move forward. So this is just a timeline of some of the things that we did. Well, I did with our team here, and it was really starting my first day hitting the ground here in November and with this coursework, and continuing to reach out through to the current administrators, the Pioneer Village Association, and then also seeking out others who have some expertise in this area, because as a new manager, I was really lost. I wasn't sure, what is the proper thing? How do you manage one of these areas? What are the proper expectations? And so we really went through and met the Historical Society of Warren County, met with their board and talked with them. They have actually preserved other cabins, and also the Great Parks of Hamilton County have a Pioneer Village as well that is really successfully run, and meeting with them to learn, the tricks of the trade regarding these types of areas.
And objective number 3 is develop this new lease. So we have a great opportunity because it does expire here soon. But one of the key opportunities here is that it has been a valued asset since 1973. So it's worth renewing this lease. But can we just do it a little bit differently this time? But there's a challenge with that. It's limited flexibility. It's state government, remember, and we have a legal team that is going to have to go through this lease. We'll have to go through. So there's a limited flexibility on what we can and can't do here.
So regarding the lease, our action steps, and these are future steps. We'll be establishing a new lease partner through all of our meetings and stakeholder identifications. Then we'll go back to the Army Corps and review the needs with them. And since they lease the property to us and then we lease it further, we need to make sure all of the partners are on the same page. Of course, our legal team will be involved and we'll do a review, and that can come up and down a few times to make sure that everything is up to standards and that we have all of our bases covered. And then yay, the signing of the lease. And of course, the sustainability piece is really about tracking and measuring. I can't say that enough, so that we don't find the village kind of in the same situation again. We want to make sure that there's a strong foundation.
And objective 4 is really just the end goal here. We want to be able to highlight the asset to Cedar Creek State Park. We really have a great opportunity here for the revitalization and the renewed interest in the area. But the key challenge would be a loss of interest before we can get to that specific objective. So we got to harness the momentum that Tiffany has found.
Right. And so the action step here would be culminating in the grand reopening. I can't wait for that day to happen. We'll have all of this underneath us and be able to move forward knowing that we have done the right thing and that it was worth doing.
So in conclusion here, the Cedar Creek Pioneer Village has been a cherished asset to the Cedar Creek region since 1973, and it's definitely worth saving. By identifying and transitioning with new partners to steward the area who can sustain the area for another 50 years. And we'll see you at the grand reopening. here's some of these buildings that Tiffany was mentioning. And if you haven't been down in the area, welcome you to come. It's definitely pretty cool. With that, we have a bird's eye view of hand-drawn map of the area. And we thank you for your attention and your time. And thank you to Rob and Alexandra throughout this this class. It has it's been fun. And with that, I would welcome your feedback and any questions you might have.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean and Tiffany. This is cool. I knew that going, like I said, being on vacation and kind of checking on stuff up here in Michigan, that there's a bunch of stuff like this in Ohio, but it's good to see the pictures, and it's really cool to see that the state of Ohio and you all are putting this effort to try to sustain these gems that we have, throughout here. So I did have a couple of things that popped up in my head. My older son is senior in high school, and he goes to the Medina County Career Center, and he's actually in the media productions program, but they do have a lot of connections with the trades. Mm-hmm. So for the building and construction, and would there be any possibility to partner with organization like that to kind of bring in people like that are working on from the trades perspective for the maintenance part of things?
Yes, there would be. And so really it would be us encouraging the administrators of the area, which is where we're at now, to really revitalize some partnerships. And then we also can reach out and create partnerships, but we want to do it with the Pioneer Village Association on board, if that makes sense. So they can, or we can also use volunteers. We love volunteer hands, and creating new programs for folks to come out and volunteer is a great idea, and one that is in our list of kind of our outcomes, what will come from the work.
I had another question. I think that everybody's looking for money. That's always the bottom line, is, do we have the money for this? Is there any type of sponsorship opportunities? I mean, I know that there's probably grants or other like government funds, but is there sponsorship opportunities to kind of bring in local revenue from businesses or things like that might be interested in being involved in this?
Yeah, and so one of the things we learned from the Warren County Historical Association was the adoption of Adopt a Building program. And that's one of the suggestions through our supporting the current administrators of the area, and will help them develop an Adopt the Building program and really get that out there. As we move through that 2023 and 2024 to provide for the new lease and the revitalization of the area.
It's interesting, Rob. We've recently started just in other parks identifying private-public partnerships, and they have renamed some of like the trails, like the Scotts Miracle Grow Trail. A little hesitant on that because our Ohio State parks are one of, I think, 3 states that are free to access, and it's one of the only places where you're not commodified. You're not expected to spend any money.
Now, we did learn the great parks of Hamilton County, they utilize their Pioneer Village as more of a revenue stream. So you do have to buy a ticket and go into the Pioneer Village, and that may be something that comes in the future. So kind of right now we were at that point where we're assessing the buildings, figuring out the administrator part of it after COVID, and having ideas and plans for the outcomes to move forward in the project.
I'll just be totally transparent. My wife calls me cheap, but I think I'm more frugal than anything else. But one of the cities that we visited was Holland, Michigan, and they have the windmills up here. So instead of paying $12 per person to kind of get in and kind of see all the windmills that they have, we just literally did a drive-by, and I was like, okay, kids, stick your head out the window and you can take a look at the windmills from like 2 blocks over. But I guess I would definitely be, interested to see if there's a way to generate some revenue by some ticket sales, but also for the fact of you want to get people engaged, and using the facility as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. But it looks like just
Well,
from
and that's also accessibility. I mean, that's an important part of it, is it being accessible to all Ohioans. And that's why our park system is free still, and one of the few state park systems that does not charge an entry fee. So, yeah, right now what they do is they charge for some special events, and I could see that probably being where it lands when it's all washed out.
Well, I'm going to pass it over to Alexandra for the Q&A part. Alexandra, take it away.
All right, great. Thanks, Rob. So far we have 1 comment and 2 questions. So Mary just states, great presentation, loved the photos and history. And then Donna asks, so what do you have in your toolbox to address loss of interest or loss of funding?
In the toolbox really is the volunteer knowledge and expertise in different areas. So utilizing volunteer boards and using them the right way, the most efficient way, in all of their expertise in their knowledge. So we have some folks who are engineers, we have folks who are professors, we have folks who are financiers, we have folks who are builders. So all of their knowledge base, they really all are the tools in our belt, our volunteers, to expand us and help us further the program.
Yeah, I would say that there's a great opportunity for social media engagement too. They've increased, I believe, last year from like 400 followers on Instagram to about 2,000. So there's definitely some room for improvement there to maintain the interest.
Another comment, nice collaboration. And then we also have a question from Jared. So Jared asks, has there been any talk of DNR's Raising Capital's windfall being used for the Pioneer Village?
No, it's a short answer. It didn't make the list. However, we don't know what's to come in the future or what the governor is holding or the director is holding. We just opened up Newtown, which I don't know if you guys have all know what that is going to be. So it's about 30 minutes away, and it's a new state park that is going to focus on, it's called Great Council State Park, and it's going to focus on the indigenous people's experience in the state of Ohio, and where all of that history happened. And so we are not very far from that. And honestly, a dream of mine would be to kind of bridge our programs. We're the Pioneer Village, they're the indigenous people's area, and very close by, and maybe we can wrap our arms around each other in some successful endeavors. All of the history is important, and it's important to know all the good, the bad, the ugly, and the wonderful of everybody who lived during this time. So that's what we're hoping to do.
All right, looks like we have another question. So Matthew says, have you found any historic preservation grants?
We have not yet. We do have a team of people who are working towards that. There's an opportunity for some federal grants because it's on Army Corps land. 2 of the buildings are on the federal registry. And so we are looking at the finance part of seeking those dollars to really help funding and putting that plan in place.
So those are all the questions that I have in my queue. Since we have a few more minutes, I'm just going to take a quick pause and see if any other questions trickle in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over to Rob.
Well, Tiffany and Sean, thanks a lot. I think this is a great project. I want to definitely keep up with all the projects that you all presented today. I would love to hear any kind of updates and feedback, and Tiffany and Sean, if there's a way that there's a grand opening, you mentioned in 2025.
Yeah.
We get the invitation, or if we have like a little cohort 8 reunion down there, or we can sponsor an event, I would definitely love to do that because we want to make sure that we continue to have a presence in your area. So please keep us posted on your progress.
Yeah, we could definitely have a reunion and do some kayaking on the lake, some fun stuff like that.
Yeah, I saw there was there a stage too? I think I saw a stage.
Yeah, there's a stage and we have a marina here in our park as well, and we sell the best hand dip ice cream around town. So we could make a day of it at Cedar Creek for sure.
Now I'm hearing it now. Ice cream. Yeah, I've been doing 10,000 steps a day. I'm trying to hit my goal when I'm up here in Michigan, but I've been, hitting 10,000 steps, but then 10,000 pounds of ice cream. So I've been selling the economic boom that's been going on in Michigan. They're like, what in the heck is going on?
I refuse to believe that discounts the steps. I'm not even going to believe it.
Yeah, that's a different story. My wife they must be like shrinking the clothes up here in Michigan though, because it's like I'm definitely getting my exercise in. So it can't be the food part. So it can't be my fault. So anyway, great project. Thank you to you both and best wishes on the next steps as you implement this.
Well, and thank you all and our cohort teammates. We have just both enjoyed the course and have enjoyed working with you all. And I really do not know if this project would have gotten off the ground without all of you and this help and Sean and everybody. And it is meaningful. It's meaningful to bring this back to life and to the level that it should be. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I love the fact that the state parks are free and please keep it that way for the cheap people, people like myself, so that we can go and enjoy them. So
I think the governor enjoys them being free too. I mean, he's really a park advocate, so he's a great supporter of us.
Yeah, they're a huge asset, huge jewel for the state of Ohio. So let's keep it that way so we can all enjoy them. That's great. Well, that concludes our day one, and I think that we're off to a fantastic start here, folks. No pressure for our day two and day three, folks, but you get an idea of kind of what the projects look like overall. Yeah, I want to say thank you for joining us, especially Ray Justice from the Ohio Department of Administrative Services. Thanks, Ray, for being with us. And I also noticed that Natoya Walker Minor, who is also one of our advisory board members. I want to give a special shout out to Natoya because Natoya was part of the strategic planning team from the city of Cleveland and the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority that was part of the original team to put together the Ohio Certified Public Manager program from the Cleveland State University edition of it. So I just want to give Natoya a shout out to say thank you for all of your support. And this is the fruit of your labor. These projects and the collaboration, the network, and just the family and the resources and the team that we're building here is just amazing. The projects you all are working on are just a great access to resource and to our community. And I really love being a part of this family. It's been an honor and a privilege to work with you and walk along with you with your journey.